There's a ton of great nerdy TV out this fall, from the new Star Wars live-action Ahsoka show to the epic journey of the Wheel of Time. The Lorehounds have got you covered with full recaps, deep discussions, and answers to listener questions.
Search for the Lorehounds on your favorite podcast app, including YouTube and Spotify, for a fire hose of science fiction and fantasy. Or head to thelorehounds.com to join the conversation via our contact form or our Discord server.
Whatever you're watching, we'll be there as your guides to great TV.
Welcome to the Foundation Podcast. We're the Lorehounds, your guides to psychohistory. I'm David.
I'm John, and this is our season wrap-up coverage of the Apple TV Plus original series, Foundation.
In this podcast, we're going to do a discussion of the entirety of Season 2 with two special guests, Marilyn R. Pukkila and Anthony LeDonne, or otherwise known as Maester Anthony. And they may or may not stick around for listener feedback, but we have a ton of listener feedback that John and I are definitely going to cover.
Be sure to stick around to the end of the podcast for programming notes about our podcasting schedule for the rest of September. A reminder that you can find all our podcasts on Spotify and YouTube, as well as all the other major podcast platforms.
And we'd like to ask, if you're enjoying what we do and have got a spare moment, leave us a rating and or a review on Apple Podcasts. Apple is the big SEO engine, and the more reviews that we get there, the more people can find us, even as far as the outer reach.
Not a lot of planets left there for people to find us there on, but also, I got to tell you, David, I don't know if you've been looking at the Apple reviews, but someone left us a lovely review that had 2 stars, and I think they just clicked the wrong button. So thank you so much for the review, and I hope that if that was you, you find a moment to change that.
You can't edit them. Once they're up, they're up. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. For ad-free episodes, early access, and exclusive content, visit patreon.com/thelorehounds. You can subscribe and support us for as little as $3 a month. You can also start a free trial now, which is very cool. And I saw a lot of people are taking advantage of that, trying us out, seeing if they like the old second breakfast and whatnot. And so far, everyone's stuck around. So we must be doing something right.
Yep, for sure. And you can also get annual subscriptions too, if that works for better for your budgeting.
What a day.
It is. It's a dawn of a new world. While this is our last Foundation podcast until season 3 returns, our Foundation email address is going to remain active. So feel free to use that to reach out to us. You can also contact us anytime about any shows that we're covering. We've got a contact form and a voicemail feature over on our website, thelorehounds.com.
You can send those emails to empire@thelorehounds.com or join the conversation on our Discord server. We've got this fun community where a lot of people are chatting away in these channels dedicated to all the shows we're covering. And there's been a lot of chatter there about Foundation, Ahsoka, Wheel of Time. I know the book spoiler thread of the Wheel of Time has been active now that we've gotten more hints about different characers.
Nice.
Episode 5. So
I'm staying out of there.
Yep, as you should. But
yes.
Yeah. We're having a great time over there.
Cool. Well, John, triple blessings to you now that our triple season coverage is over. I am glad to have a little bit of breather. I've been actually able to watch some other shows that I want to catch up on and stuff.
I know. I'm back on the One Piece grind.
Oh, nice.
A great time.
Very good.
I'm going to be king of the pirates now. Now I have time to pursue my dream.
Well, I am excited to hear you and your take. You and Moses is your take on the One Piece live action. So it sounds like it got good reviews.
It did. It was shockingly good. Anyway,
unlike
we're not
Cowboy
here to
Bebop,
talk about One Piece.
sadly.
Oh yeah, Cowboy Bebop was very bad.
Yeah.
But we're not here to discuss those anime adaptations. We're here to discuss the adaptation of Isaac Asimov's Foundation series.
John.
John. Who's going to do it first?
You go.
We're getting punchy here at the end of our triple coverage.
Wait, yes. It's the beginning of the podcast and we're already punchy.
But the end of our triple coverage. Fine, I'll go first. I loved it. I thought it was a step up from season 1 in every way. I mentioned this to you, David. I was nervous to cover Foundation after watching season 1 because I was like, what if this is worse than season 1
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like it? Because season 1 was serviceable, but it had issues mostly from COVID and mostly from needing to find its footing in this vast world that needed a lot of onboarding.
Yep.
And
A
I
lot of
thought,
building that they got to go through.
And I thought to myself, if this is a step down from season 1, I'm not going to have a good time, and it's going to be hard to talk about. You and I talk about all the time. We don't want to podcast about shows we don't like because it's just not fun for anybody, including the listener.
Yeah.
And from episode 1, I was really impressed with this season. The writing was tighter. The humor was there. I know David Goyer said that was intentional. The pacing was better. I felt like I
pacing was
better. The lead pacing was better and more clad.
Yes.
And I just thought it was operating at a much higher level. The openness of David Goyer to interact with the community so much, and I know he mentioned on a different podcast that it's partly because of the writer's strike. He's able to do so many interviews and whatnot, but
right, he's got time.
right. But it has been a big help because I definitely view the show differently, getting inside the showrunner's mind a little bit.
Right.
And overall, like, the characters seemed fuller this season, even the ones that we only spent a little bit of time with, like Hober and Polly. The new additions like those and Constant were great. The development of the different Cleons was, of course, amazing. We knew Lee Pace was going to bring it, but he really did. But even Dusk and Dawn were knocking it out of the park, portraying different versions of Cleon. Really, really selling me on these are different people. And that is such a hard thing to do. And I can't believe they pull it off so well.
Right.
Laura Dern. Not Laura Dern.
Laura Byrne. Byrne, I think, is how we pronounce her name.
Laura Dern. Not Laura Dern. We're not in Jurassic Park. She was operating perhaps on a higher level than that, even, because I've never felt more emotion for a robot than I have in this. Right. And I've watched Westworld, and Westworld tried to get me to feel that much emotion for a robot. But this was truly something else. And it was great because this was not the central part of the show, but it was such a rich piece of the show that it could have been its own show.
Right.
And I'm just so impressed. And I cannot wait till season 3. I think that the stakes are set up really well for season 3. And I am looking forward to seeing whenever it comes out with all these strikes going on.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get that resolved and everybody can get back to work and we can find some equality for the people that really make these shows.
Right.
It's, you've got to have a company and you've got to have some people who know how to run businesses, but you need creatives, you need actors, you need grips and gaffers and best boys and all kinds of stuff. And all of those people need to have work that is respected and have dignity in their work. And you don't get that with inequalities. So that aside,
something I want to add to that is you have talked about a lot, and I agree with you, and you've been done a great job highlighting this, is how many little details are there, how many references to different cultures and different historical pieces, and that just could not be done by an AI, that really tap into varied experiences being in the writer's room.
Or look at Laura Byrne's performance of Demerzel, a human playing a robot who is pretending to have human emotions. The layers of complexity and the ability for her to deliver that performance is exceptional. Or Lee Pace, being one actor, but playing these multi-generational roles. Terrence Mann, and I apologize, I forget Dawn's, the actor who plays Dawn. But all of them just bringing these super nuanced performances. They have a hard enough time in video games to make characters that are nuanced and walk appropriately.
And that's with motion capture even.
Exactly.
You have people modeling it for you and you still can't do it.
Right. So it's a really important thing. And I really just hope that we can get everybody back to work, not only for our own sake as podcasters, but for all those people who have families on the line, as well as their loved ones who are in the industry. Anyway.
Yeah. And I to counterpoint that, I did just see a TikTok of Arnold Schwarzenegger singing "I Want to Dance with Somebody."
Okay.
So AI can make some art.
Oh, that thing, right? Yeah. Those kinds of things. Yeah, sure.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Anyway, give us your thoughts, David.
Well, I think I agree with pretty much everything that you said. I have three, just to build on off of what you said, but then just the three things that I want to highlight for me out of that, which are this season built from episode to episode, from episode 1 through episode 10. And I don't want to litigate episode 10, right? There's a whole podcast on it. We can talk, you can go back and listen to that. The season overall was a triumph. And one of the things why it's a triumph in my book is that every episode built on the previous episode, laid out questions and mysteries, but also then built on what was set up in previous episodes, 1, 2, 3 episodes prior. So everything was there for us. That felt really good. And the action and the drama just kept rising and rising and rising, and ultimately to episode 9, which was by far my favorite. I think, what was it, 6, I think I was saying, or 5 back in the middle of the season, where I messaged you like 3 or 4 times, oh, this is my favorite episodes. 9 is just clearly hands down my favorite. Yeah.
So, although 9 ended in a place that compelled me to break my own rule and keep watching.
Right. So I love that it's a season that was able to build over the course of its run. I love a show that can roll out big ideas: determinism versus free will, faith versus belief, technology versus, ancient lore knowledge, what have you. The encyclopedization of all human knowledge, human societies rising and falling, and order versus, or disorder versus order, the politics of these things, this Shakespearean nature of Demerzel being trapped by immortality. Who was it on our Discord was saying something about that today? Sub-Zero was saying what a tragic figure she is, and how Shakespearean. Yeah. And I was like, absolutely. So I love a show that can roll out these really big concepts, but then I don't feel like I'm being preached to. I don't feel like it's forcing ideas on me. It's setting up these conundrums and these circumstances and these conditions, winding it up, and then letting it play out. And then we can see how different things are going to, it's a perfect theater of the mind kind of thing. Like, what happens if this happens? Mm-hmm. What happens if that person says this and does this? It's a fantastic little micro experiment of what if. So
which is even more impressive. I just want to add that Asimov's foundation is extremely preachy at times,
right,
and does use characters as mouthpieces for his idea. I think that's how David Goyer phrased it. Even is these characters are largely mouthpieces for Asimov's idea, and okay, that's a stylistic choice, but I don't think that fits very well in our modern TV canon.
Right,
and this was a marvelous way to take a lot of those big ideas and turn them into stories that will resonate with a modern audience.
Having a show like this that can roll these big ideas out, again, success, triumph. And then I think the last thing I wanted to flag was that when you have a production that is coming together, that the production crew, the writers, the directors, the actors, all of that coming together, and it's in an environment of success and bringing our best, bringing our A game, whatever, corporate speak, team building thing you want to apply to this. When people are given an environment to excel in and to bring their highest selves and their most passion and creativity in a way that they can achieve it, and when they can achieve those kinds of goals, it's really great. And to see Lee Pace, the performances that he was giving were just incredible. Laura Barron's performances, they are excelling, and I love that for the people that make the shows, because then they can turn around and go, look what we made, and we are proud of it, and we are happy by it, and it's made people happy, it's made people think. And for me, that's another important part of the shows I watch is did people get to excel? Did people get to bring their best creativity to it? And I think for this show, it's across the board, all of those things. So.
Well, cool. I think it's safe to say we both like the season a lot.
I think so. It's very safe.
I think we'll gushed enough about it.
we'll see where it shakes out at our end of the year roundup. And remember, everybody, there'll be a publicly accessible version of our Second Breakfast podcast, which is our Patreon exclusive. But we always make the Christmas one free for everybody, and that's where we go over our top 10s for the year. And no doubt, Foundation's going to be very high up, but I just don't know where it's going to rank yet.
Right now, it's in my top 3.
For sure.
I'm not sure where, but it's in my top 3 right now.
Yeah. We've got a few more shows to come this year, and then I got to sit down. I was trying to clean up my list already so that I'm not freaking out at the end of the year. It's like doing your taxes. Like, oh my God, it's April 14th and I haven't even started.
Right. Well, Loki's not making my list. I'm going to promise that. But anyway.
Ouch.
Anyway, no, I'm probably not even going to watch it. That's the problem.
Okay. Well, you can listen to our coverage when Jean
I can listen to your coverage. I'm
Elysia.
just not a big Marvel guy. I think we've established that. I've tried to join you on the Secret Invasion, and I don't think that worked out.
Secret Invasion was exceptionally problematic.
What a show for me to choose to come back in on. Anyway.
And what a show. Yeah. Anyway, let's not go there. Let's not get into it.
Yeah, but new MCU soon. So stay tuned for thoughts on Secret Invasion. Just not mine. Anyway, I think it's time we welcome our guests. So let's take a quick break. When we get back, we will welcome them. And we're back. David, now that we're back from our break, who do we have with us today?
Well, we are very fortunate. We were thinking about who we could invite to come talk with us about the show. And I remember we had a great conversation with Anthony at the end of Andor. And of course, we talked to Marilyn all the time. And I thought, hey, Marilyn loves Foundation. Anthony's enjoying the show. Let's get these two folks together because they haven't been on a Lorehounds podcast together. So welcome.
You know what's funny is that they were both on the Andor wrap up, but separately.
Separately, that's right. Is
that right? Interesting.
That is true, yeah. So Marilyn R. Pukkila, our favorite Tolkien scholar, and turns out to be also a bit of an Asimov expert. Well, I don't know expert, but you're a big
aficionado. Asimov aficionado.
That's right. And Anthony, Maester Anthony, is that? Are we calling you?
I go by Anthony, and
okay.
for the time being, you can refer to me as Becky's arse.
Becky's arse. I like Becky's arse better than Becky's arsehole.
Tonight I do taste like Becky Arse's. Her ass smells. Is that what he said?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
We have to ask Harry Smeldon.
Oh, but she who makes jokes. Anthony, really quick, just in case there are folks out there listening and they don't know you or necessarily know how we know you, do you want to just give a little podcasting profile of yourself?
Yeah, sure. I've been working through the George R.R. Martin Ice and Fire series for a few years now. We're in the middle of Clash over at Electric Boogaloo. And then for the Lorehounds, Steve and I review sometimes good movies, sometimes bad movies. Sometimes we have a lot of fun reviewing bad movies. So over at Properly Howard, this last week we covered The Departed. And next week we're going to look at the Nick Cage reboot of Wicker Man, which I've never seen.
I've been looking forward to that all season.
But I've heard it's very, very bad. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, you and Steve have been on fire this season, so really enjoying your coverage of that. Cool. And Marilyn, you want to just give us a quick profile of you and what you're up to these days?
Sure. I am academic librarian emerita from Colby College in Maine, where I retired about 4 years ago, and promptly discovered the world of podcasts and discovered that there were people out there who wanted to hear from me. And that was magnificent and wonderful fun. and met you guys very early on in your Rings of Power coverage.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Responded to your question about what's a Barovian, and the rest is history, right?
That's it. Yep. And you've joined us on a lot of different shows and a lot of different topics.
You've been very generous in allowing me to come on and express myself.
You've been generous with your knowledge and time.
Right.
So
yeah. And we don't have to announce anything, but I know you have some podcasting ideas of your own bubbling in the background, and
yes, I do.
Working through those, and
yes,
so
I do.
We will
Stay
be
tuned.
eagerly excited. We are eager and excited for
watch this space. And I just got back from Oxenmoot.
Oh yes,
delivered a paper on the Lament of Boromir and its literary influences, which was well received, and that was a lot of fun. And finally getting to see in person people who I've been exchanging views and whatnot with.
Oh, that's great.
Via Zoom and online and stuff for a long time. Kind of like when David was able to come and swing by generously for an afternoon.
Yes,
to,
visit in person.
And
I think for our next Silmarillion podcast, Silmarillion Stories podcast, we were going to have you pop on really quick and give us a briefing on how Oxenmoot went this year and some of the interesting things that are going on.
I will be happy to do it, and I will do my best to be brief.
Fabulous. Great. Okay. Well, so we're here to talk about Foundation Season 2. And I think from what you all have sent in and some of the things that John and I were thinking of, we're talking sort of more big picture-y stuff and not necessarily we can get into the details of individual episodes and whatnot, but I feel there's a lot of interesting big topics floating out here. But before we dive into that, I would love to just get your hot takes for the season. What did you think as a viewer of a season of television? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What are your highs? What are your lows? All that stuff. So Marilyn, why don't you start us off with that?
Sure thing. Well, overall impression, season 2 definitely upped the game from season 1. I really thought it was so much better. I think once they had established themselves, and of course did a lot of track laying, as we know, they just started taking risks all over the place, and it was breathtaking. It was just absolutely wonderful to see them stretching and growing. The production level quality continued magnificently. Lots of interesting character development and new things coming in. Little hesitant about the very last episode in some details, but overall fabulous season. And the worst part of it is we don't know when season 3 is going to be coming around, and that's probably the hardest part to take of all. But it's fun to see how they're bringing in details, not just from the 3 books, but from the auxiliary, if you will, the 2 prequels and the 1 sequel that come along, and all of the stuff about robotics. Very interesting. My partner is now listening to iRobot as a result of all of this, and very, very interested to see the bits and pieces that have been taken in, and some interesting differences in choices too. So that's been fun to track.
I've been tempted to maybe pick up some of the iRobot books myself. It's been in the back of my mind. I want to know more about Demerzel. So
I downloaded Foundation and Empire. It's fine. I swore I wouldn't read it, and here I am.
Good for you, John.
Nice.
I would like to echo a lot of what Marilyn said. I did enjoy this season significantly more than season 1. I felt like season 1, the thing that was most interesting to me was Empire and the cloning successions and the day and the dawn and the dusk characters and genetic drift and all of that business. That to me, that was the most fascinating part, which of course is a show only invention, right? So that to me, I was like, I trust these guys. I feel like they are doing something that the original book didn't do, and I like it better than the rest of what I'm watching, right? So at that point, I think, well, if I can learn to trust the creative acumen of the showrunners, I'm almost willing to see the kinds of risks that Marilyn was talking about. In addition to that, Show looks like $1 million. It just
Mhm.
it looks so great. And for season 2, I felt like this was Demerzel's season. I felt like this season was she was the most fascinating thing to me about this particular season. I couldn't wait to get back to the Demerzel plot throughout, although I was kind of fascinated by the psychic planet. What was their little cults?
Ignis.
The Ignis
the
plot
sighted.
was also very interesting to me too. I thought that Hober Mallow brought a little bit of swashbuckling Star Wars-ish characteristic.
Rakish rogue thing.
Right, yeah. Right.
Han Solo vibes.
Totally.
Brother Constant was fantastic. I never didn't like a scene she was in. I'm really looking forward to her in season 3. Fingers crossed on season 3, right? But Demerzel really stole the show this season.
Yeah.
All of the things that they're exploring there. And let me also interject and say that this show sounds magnificent. I adore Bear McCreary's score, and I can't wait for future developments along those lines.
John, are we saying anything at this point?
I think we can safely say we've scheduled
Yes.
our talk. We're going to be talking to Bear McCreary next month, so stay tuned on that. We'll be talking to him not just about Foundation, but about Rings of Power too.
Oh, fantastic!
We want to
Cannot
get
wait.
some input on his process and whatnot.
And if you're a subscriber, if you're one of our lore masters or one of our co-hosts, we're going to be soliciting all of you for some questions to be able to add to that show. Yeah.
He zoomed in at Oxenmoot, and he's just a fabulous speaker.
That's great.
Seems like a fantastic guy, and I have read a bunch of his tweets and his writings about his process and his like reversible Sauron theme, things like that, and it's fascinating, and I can't wait to dig into his mind a little bit.
Yeah, the whole new tech that they invented for him for this show. I mean, mind blown.
Yeah. I want to echo too something, Anthony, that you were saying about the way that this show looks good. And one of the things, and then the esteem and the respect that you have for the people who are making it. The one thing that I'm really impressed by David Goyer is that he's a smart showrunner. He's deploying his assets and his financial resources smartly. He's like, okay, well, we've got this much budget, and we're going to allocate it for this and for that. And we're going to get a lot of excitement out of this thing. And it can be very simple. And then this thing's got to be much more complex. And so, and when you hear him in different interviews on other shows or when he's on Reddit and stuff like that, he talks about how the choices that they have to make while they're creating the show. And in some places, how they go full out. And other times they've got to pull back and balance off of something else. And it just, again, and I go with you on this, is that these, not only Goyer, but all the team and the writer and everybody he's working with, they're making really smart choices. And maybe even if a choice doesn't always, hit 100%, it's still, I can respect it because it's an honest choice that they're making, and they're balancing a lot of things. And so there's a lot of authenticity in the production of the show. And so, I really like that they try to make the show look as good as it can, because they know that that's an important thing for modern television viewers. And so to balance that against who are we going to hire and how we're going to build a set and what's the CGI going to look like. Yeah, it's really phenomenal.
I gotta say that this season really cemented for me that Apple TV is the current king of science fiction that looks great, right? I mean, even if not every show hits on the storytelling and things like that, which I think most of them do, I think that every show has looked amazing. And kudos to them for really putting in the money for these big science fiction budgets.
Yeah. Well, let's roll in. We asked for a few topics from each of you to use as a framework to talk about the season. And I think I want to start, Anthony, with one of yours, which is the AI long con.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I was like, that's an intriguing topic. And so what's your thought behind this idea?
Well, this really got answered in the penultimate episode for me, but I was always wondering, where did Demerzel come from and how long has she been around?
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't, I know that Goyer's talked about like her true identity elsewhere. I haven't listened to any of that stuff.
Okay.
I just listened to the Lorehounds. I'm faithful to the Lorehounds.
So
So I'm spoiler free.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Comes to that. But in episode 9, was it episode 9? The penultimate? All right.
That was the big Demerzel one, yeah.
Right. Yeah. You got the sense that she could wait millennia.
Mm-hmm.
And for her, it was sort of like, well, I guess at that point, it's like, what are your options? What are your options? but it's funny. For me, it feels like, believably, we have a character in the show who has a different relationship to time. And that is hard to pull off. And I think that they did that in such a way that makes me feel like this character has believable limitations. I think that the immediate temptation with sort of a super intelligence is to make them godlike. But what they did with Demerzel is they gave her enough limitations to her power so that she actually had to work to get where she was. And on top of that, I feel like even if she has to wait a couple hundred years or even 600 years before Empire kind of swallows itself, what's the big deal? Why, that's a blink of an eye to her. So for me, I feel like the AI long con was really, really satisfying to me because believably, she feels like a person with a different relationship to time than every other character in this show. Right.
And that's one of the things that Goyer and the writers, I think, were really challenged by, was that the Asimov story is over millennia. And how do you make that into a television show that can be interesting and with the same characters? And so it's not an anthology series that reboots every year. And so then to make a character, to take an existing canon, something from the Asimov stew, so to speak, and pull one. I don't want to, give too many hints away. There's lots of hints out there, but to be able to do that, and then as that character is a through line for us in the story.
Well, and the key difference between her and the Empire clone factory is that every single person that they decant to be Day has that legacy question. Like, how am I going to distinguish myself from all of my brothers? Am I just, am I just one more emperor on the conveyor belt, or am I going to be remembered? How am I going to be painted on this wall? Demerzel doesn't have that
wagging
problem.
flagellum, right?
That's right. Demerzel does not have that problem, and she doesn't have to distinguish herself from a previous decantation of herself.
And I really wonder if Cleon the First ever foresaw that problem, because he only thought of himself as a unit, as a whole. But it seems to me that this is basic human nature. Even though you're supposed to be the same, you want to distinguish yourself.
He even gives brothers Dusk and Dawn crap about it, right? He says, well, if you're going to start infighting, then this whole thing is ruined. You have to be the same person. Huh. Right. Something I wanted to cut in with before was this whole idea of she can wait forever. I'm just realizing as you're saying that we open this season with an artificial intelligence construct going insane for being locked in a box for 138 years. Right. Why is it so different for Harry Seldon, digital Seldon, than it is for Demerzel?
I've got an idea here, but I'd like to hear someone else answer first.
Well, I think it's because he is human from the get-go and just had no concept, no expectation of living that long or existing in that fashion. A robot, by its nature, unless, really intense destruction comes along, expects to outlast whatever.
And she's got 18,000 years of practice.
Sure. Another thing that's occurred to me with this whole business of, long story over time, I keep bouncing in my head between this and Rings of Power. Because they're faced with the same problem. And the two shows chose two very different solutions for it. And I got to say, I like the Foundation solution better. And the sad thing is, Galadriel could have stood in for Demerzel.
Interesting.
Sure. I guess the question is, what do you do with the humans in Rings of Power? Because we don't have cryo sleep in Rings of Power.
Exactly.
So I think they had a tougher job than you would in science fiction, where you can kind of hand weave away. They went to sleep for 100 years. Don't worry about it.
But you see, you can tell more stories, which is in essence what that was. But I realize I'm getting off track here, so I will.
Anthony,
I will hold that thought.
You had a thought.
It was a lot like Marilyn's. The original Harry Seldon was a human with human anxieties. And so then imagine construing those digitally for thousands of years. You don't have that same problem with Demerzel. Not to say that there isn't some kind of simulated emotion, analogous to that for Demerzel, but not the same default settings, I would say.
Okay. No need to shout, "I was conscious."
Well,
Gail Dornick.
She says it in her own way, though. She says, "I'm awake. I'm awake the whole time. I just wait." Right?
Yeah.
That was her way to say the same thing.
And Harry never had any and no expectation of ever being disembodied and conscious.
That too, right? And our consciousness and our physical body are very tightly intertwined.
If we're functioning on all cylinders, yes. If
Yeah.
we're not, then there's a different kind of problem.
Right. I think this is an interesting crossroad here because we've been talking both about time and memory, and those are two things, Marilyn, that you have on your notes. Do you have an inclination? Do you want to swing into the memory or swing into the time? Because they're also just facets of this sort of gemstone-like construct that we have here.
Prime Radiant-like? I don't know.
Yes, there you go. Even.
Well, the thing about time, I was very interested in the mechanisms which we've been talking about, by which the show handles these vast sweeps of time. The cloning of the Creons and the cryopods and so forth. And I did want to raise the question, are they by and large successful, or are they cheating a little bit too?
From a television standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint.
Yeah, from a storytelling standpoint. The whole thing of, we'll have Harry and Gale survive throughout. We'll just throw them in the cryopod whenever we need to jump ahead.
And I think Goyer's even, some people have asked him that, the Bald Move guys, I think we're talking with him about this a little bit. And how many times can you get away with that before it stops working or starts seeming ridiculous?
Or maybe you introduce another possible means of dealing with it, which I don't know. I mean, we've had shows where people have been frozen for 1,000 years and then wake up and, so there was a more clumsy, perhaps.
I don't know, John, Anthony, any thoughts about the shortcut of the cryopods and the...
I mean, I agree that you can't keep doing this, right? It can't be every single season they go to sleep at the end.
I don't understand why not. I mean,
it's true.
You've got it. You've got
I think it would just start
it's
feeling
like every
tired.
single time Luke Skywalker turns on a lightsaber, it turns on. So these guys have a different kind of technology, and every single time they want to use it, they can use it. I mean, why wouldn't you, if you were Harry Seldon or someone who cared about psychohistory, why wouldn't you want to see the next crisis?
Yeah.
But that's not how he planned it out in the initial. He planned that he would not be there.
True.
Well, I don't know if that's true because he planned to be digital forever.
He planned to be double.
How do you see that, John? Where does that come from?
He was going to be digital and on Helicon. That was his original plan with
Oh,
Raish.
okay.
And so
Remember
Digital
Raish
Harry
downloaded him.
was going to be on
right.
Helicon forever, running the Foundation. It seemed like the second Foundation, and
Right.
then other Digital Harry was going to be on Terminus, handling Plan B, being the left hand. Fuck, I'm the left hand. Anyway,
That was so good. That was a great scene.
yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I'm still having to shift my mind into these new approaches because it's very different from the books. I probably have to say.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I would say, we asked Goyer, are you going to take a more book-centric approach and have different characters be the focus of later seasons? And he answered in a much more straightforward way than I thought he would. He said, oh, 2 or 3. He said 3 characters will make it to the final season. 2 characters will make it all the way. And I was like, what? That is just such a direct answer. But I will say, before this last episode, I would have said that Salvor Hardin was one of the ones who made it to the end.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of their really huge risks, I think, that they took.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it falls back in line with the books because, of course, Salvor Hardin doesn't survive even to the end of the first one, I think.
If they want to bring back Salvor Hardin, they can absolutely do that. I mean,
please don't.
They do all kinds of magic with this show
for a lot of reasons.
Now you're touching on one of my other questions, Anthony, which is the difference between magic and tech and faith. But
this is a show with magic. It basically, they've got a magic box.
It is,
and you can put anything in it. You could put a rock in a magic box, and it'll come out a human. I don't know what they do, but
yeah. But another thing about time that I've been puzzling over is they're, to my mind, they're really kind of vague about how much time passes. Because we're cutting back and forth between 2 or 3 or 4 different threads. And I'm really confused about how much time did Talon spend teaching Gale. I mean, she shows a remarkable increase in her capacity and her strength without my sensing that any time particularly had passed.
Mm-hmm.
And also the simultaneity of, when this is happening on Trantor, what's happening on Ignis kind of thing. That they also were kind of vague on, to my mind. And
yeah, and on the official podcast, Goyer did confirm that when Salvor paid a visit to Dr. Selden, the digital Selden in the thing.
Selden.
Lefty
Selden.
Left Selden, yes, Left Selden. I like that. That timeline is not concurrent and simultaneous with other timelines. So these timelines are all slightly shifted off. I don't want to say axis from each other, but they're not all perfectly lined up. And I agree. At the end of the season, when they put Gale and Harry to sleep, did they spend a year training the Mentalics? Did they just do it right away? It felt like it was just right away. So I think that's a production show writing question. I think that it was left a little bit vague.
Yeah, and maybe they'll do, flashback types of things or whatever. But it really did seem like a pretty abrupt peace out, folks.
Yeah.
we freed you from Talon. Now go forth and do good. I mean, what are they supposed to be learning? How are they supposed to learn?
What are they supposed? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to headcanon that. And for the record, I think that that's not the way to do it. I think that they should be a little bit more explicit in the show. But I'm going to headcanon they spent a year or 2 training them with here's the fundamentals of, psychohistory. Here's a textbook. Go do this for 100 years. We'll be back every couple years.
Yeah. Which at the same time, superimposed over all of this is the what I call the Sumerian myth of Inanna and the dying and rising god.
Say more, please.
Well, this is one of the very earliest recorded stories of the dying and rising god. Inanna, queen of heaven and earth, Dumuzi was her human consort. She takes a journey to the underworld, and upon return finds out that her husband Dumuzi has really been lording it up, whereas everybody else has been grieving her loss and fearing for her disappearance. And so she has to send somebody in her place when she leaves the underworld, because nobody's ever done this before. And she sends Dumuzi because he has refused to mourn her while she was gone. And so then Dumuzi runs away, and his sister comes along and says, "Oh, I'll take the hit for you." And so the Dumuzi and his sister do this cyclical descent and return kind of thing, whereas the goddess remains in place overall.
Okay.
And I'm just seeing, well, you saw the list of half a dozen different religious references that I can see, rightly or wrongly, because there is this really fine line that they're treading between sci-fi and fantasy in a way, or tech and myth.
Right. Well, I think this kind of segues into a thought that Anthony, you had. You wrote down here on your notes, how does a storyteller make fake religion feel authentic? What's your thought there? And we've got Marilyn here talking about.
I could ask you all this, but my feeling is that I rarely see stories that have religious elements depicted that feel authentic to me. Same thing with academia. Like I rarely see a show that like explores what the culture is like, the in libraries and hallways and offices and classrooms. Whenever I see that on the screen, I feel like this person has a very limited perspective on the sociology involved. And the politics of these relationships. I feel that same way about religion, and I feel like sometimes these things are very superficial. I feel like the way that you make a fake religion feel authentic on the screen is that you invest time in the sociology of the people. And I feel like, for me, the Empire is a stand-in for the Roman imperial cult.
Right.
In so many ways. And even though I think Day says at one point, even my brothers and I never cast ourselves as gods. And Selden says, that's debatable. And the reason why it's debatable is because they're absolutely casting themselves as gods. Right? They're even triune, in a sense. And everyone, earlier in the season, I think Day says something like, well, the commoners need to know that every single thing that they do is done because we allow it to be done. That's God language, right? So now to me, that feels fascinating. I'm interested in that. The showrunners have invested time in showing me the motives and the problems of this particular godhead. Whereas, you go over to Foundation and, maybe it's supposed to be a young cult, 100 years old or whatever, but that religion feels very superficial. It feels like, 100 years old is not very old for a religion. There should still be sort of very dynamic religious experience that's happening. And I kind of felt like all we got here is charlatans and, a few people that kind of believe, but mostly it's just administrators. And I don't really even understand what motivates the adherents of this religion.
And we even had Polly, who was who had seen the quote unquote prophet and had experienced.
Yeah, but I don't understand the sociology of it. I don't understand how these people relate to it. I mean, I think that might be an authentic expression of faith, but to me, faith and religion are not the same thing. They overlap.
Yeah,
I do feel
absolutely.
like this show did a really great job with some religions and really poor job with other religions. So I don't know how you all feel about that.
Well, I don't see Constant as a charlatan.
No,
I think Constant is one of the saving graces, if you will, of the quote unquote religion of Harry Seldon. I think it's harder to put it in those terms because we see how very human Seldon is. And we're not accustomed to deities that have that much humanity. I mean, the Cleons are clearly distinct in various respects, and so it's easier to kind of set them apart. Although I have to say, I don't see any signs of anybody worshiping the Cleons.
I mean, I'd worship Lee Pace, but...
Well, that's another story, right?
Well, if you think about the Roman imperial cult, it's sort of like everyone's got their own religion on the side.
But nobody's building altars.
But
to
as
them or
long
to
as you
anybody else.
nod to the Roman imperial cult and pay your taxes,
Mhm.
it's everyone kind of knows that it's a civic function, right? So I feel like with Brother Constant, I feel that her faith is authentic. I don't understand how she fits in within the social dynamics of the world that she lives in. And I don't feel like they did enough to show her relating to other people of faith in this show.
I think that even in the real world, there are flavors of major religions that are based upon the apocalypse is coming and we got to be the ones to survive it or make the world better or
Sure.
whatever else we need to do, right? And I think that is the core of the foundation, the Church of Selden or whatever it is, Church of the Holy Spirit of Science.
Scientism.
Yeah,
The galactic
scientism.
spirit.
The galactic
Spirit. There you go. But I mean, I think that the reason it didn't bother me, besides the fact that I'm not a theologian, is that I felt like it was meant to feel flimsy because the high cleric himself did not believe in this religion and was struggling with substance abuse because he felt like this was a sham. The people who funded and really, put this religion out there were treating this as a recruitment tool for the foundation. This was not a genuine thing. Like, this was a cult in every sense of the word. This was not a fully
It did feel
religion,
like that's the
and
problem.
it was for a
It did
limited
not feel like
purpose.
a cult to me.
No.
Yeah.
It might have been a cultus,
Yeah,
but not a cult.
yeah, maybe.
So would you have felt better if Constant wasn't so earnest?
No, I would have felt much worse.
No, Constant was necessary. It was necessary, but just to give you a sense of the kinds of things that I'm talking about, it's like it only took 2 or 3 episodes of Game of Thrones for you to realize that this tree worship of the old gods was 1,000 years old, and it motivated Ned's character, and everything around the Winterfell was hinged on this green site kind of religion. It didn't take long for them to do that. They had a whole season to make that religion feel lived in, and they couldn't do it. So it's a small disappointment, but I kind of feel like I see it over and over and over and over in shows like this, that I feel like the showrunners, there are a few sociological aspects of religion that is just not quite understood.
Do you really think that they intended to make it feel lived in?
Well, lots of other stuff feels really well thought out.
Can I ask you?
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm not sure that the showrunners ever intended us to feel that it was a religion. I think Constance's faith was something that the people in her world didn't really expect to have happen. I mean, I see a few Selden worshippers, if you will, standing at the perimeter of the vault the second time it opens. I think of the children planting the flags.
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of actions, response to some kind of energy being, whatever, that is greater than you. Very primitive in a sense, but still, what we're saying, it's only been around 100 years. I mean, who knows what the early Christians looked like? And they had a much more dramatic event to carry through. And I also think that the broadcast of Constant reciting, her scriptures, if you will, as she was about to have her head cut off in a particularly gruesome way, went out across the galaxy. And I'm not sure we've seen all the ripples and repercussions of that yet. Now, I think for Harry, sociologically, religion was a phase. It had no
He even says so. Oh, you're in the religion phase.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly.
It was always meant to come down. And I don't think we're going to see this in season 3. I think this is done.
I'll be interested. I'll really be interested to see, because I believe in Constance's faith, if you will.
Let me just point out 2 little things that they could have done here. Religions don't come from nowhere. They're usually adaptations from previous religions. It's like you've got a religion that's been around 1,000 years. You have a new oracle experience, and now you have to reinterpret the old tradition, and that's where you get a new religion. The other thing is you need insiders and outsiders. You need sort of an in-group mentality and suspicion of outsiders. You need to feel like I have to honor my ancestors and I have to teach the old ways to my children. And if I don't do that, I might be outside of my tribe. I might wind up in liminal space, and I might be in outer darkness because my family doesn't recognize me as a person of faith anymore. Those are real, legitimate anxieties for an authentic religion. And you could do, I mean, it wouldn't take much. It really wouldn't take much. So, I mean, this is sort of like a small aspect, but I do feel like whenever the show moved to Foundation, it felt flat. It felt flat.
Another thing about Polly, though, he never said that he believed in Selden the prophet. He believed in the plan. And I think his drunkenness resulted from his shame that he was going around like a snake oil salesman.
Yes. Can I actually tell you that David Goyer published a scene, the script of a scene that never got shot, that never made it into the final episode.
And have you read it?
I have read parts of it, and there's a line that they gave Polly to Dr. Selden, to Left Hand Harry, that I think really would have helped us. It's basically this whole scene. Polly is calling out Harry for killing the warden in the first episode. I don't remember what episode. And he says in the end, "I still believe in the Foundation and in the galactic spirit. I just don't believe in you."
Yeah. It's real hard really wish this existed. It's real hard to believe in a human being a god. And I think, again, how much of this was Asimov's experience of Judaism, but I really see Harry acting in the mold of an Old Testament, of the Tanakh deity. You know, as he even says himself, you know, you have to be capriciously wrathful sometimes. And so these echoes are there for those who are familiar with it, and maybe that kind of brings them along. But I don't think we're intended to see this as a genuine religion, except for Constant.
Anthony, I wanted to ask you, in season 1, when we had Luminism and the Triple Goddess, and we spent, you know, a good chunk of time there. Did we even go 2 episodes with?
Yeah, and that was fascinating to me.
Okay, so they sold you there.
I feel like they established pilgrimage and ritual and authority, and it was very simple, but and I just want to reiterate, I think that they did a really great job mirroring the Roman imperial cult. And I was really fascinated by the whole Ignis plot, which is very, very religious, right? So they did it. They made it interesting 2 out of 3, right? So I guess I'm just nitpicking, but the show is called Foundation. And when we were ever at Foundation, it was kind of boring. So there it is.
Cool. Interesting.
I loved the Triple Goddess, but let's remember that it had been around for more than 10,000 years.
Right.
In that world. So yeah, definitely more established. But bringing in, you know, the feminist spirituality of Maiden, Woman, and Crone was I loved it. I thought it was great.
Well, I think this kind of segues a little bit back over to you, Marilyn, in the world of magic, tech, and faith. And you have ors in between yours. I don't know. Do we need an or operator, or is it magic and tech and faith?
It's or.
It's or.
Magic or tech or faith. What's the difference?
Yeah. No, but I'm asking the question. Does it in the framing of your question, right? Or does something, right? And does something with, by, you know. So is the operator or? Is that what you're actually driving at? Like, we've got to have magic or tech or faith?
My impression is that this is how viewers would parse the world.
Okay.
and insist that these are three separate things.
Cool.
I think they're blurring the lines,
Mm-hmm.
particularly on Ignis.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I hope that they get into whenever the next season comes out is the science of Mentalics. Because that's how Asimov presented it originally. He presented it as an outgrowth of psychology. And he set up the original foundation with a whole bunch of scientists, but almost no psychologists. And the second foundation, which we didn't even find out about until later on in the series, was set up to be almost exclusively psychologists.
Mm-hmm.
This is how he envisioned it at the time. So as viewers, do we look at the Mentalics abilities and say, oh, well, that's totally, fantastical and there's no scientific basis for it? It's a form of quote unquote magic in this particular universe. Or is it something that could be enhanced through, think of Gail reciting her primes.
Mm-hmm.
You don't usually use prime numbers as a religious mantra, right?
Right.
But you come away with the impression that this is her form of meditation. And it has effects for her because of her particular mentalic abilities. But there's people all over the galaxy that have these abilities, and tell them we're running around the galaxy plucking them out from their obscurity and putting them on this planet for very nefarious ends, as it turns out. But did she have any scientific sense of it? How did she learn her skills? What was her training like?
Mm-hmm.
To what extent can we view this as a technology? But a technology of the human mind instead of a technology of physical objects.
Well, there is precedent for mixing magic and tech. There's a little franchise you might have heard of called Star Wars that
Exactly.
I think does this quite often.
Exactly. And it's, for a lot of sci-fi fans, that's what they really dislike about Star Wars. Is that
Right,
it brings
I think that's right. Yeah.
It brings in the non-material.
Mm-hmm. And I think the Wheel of Time plays with this idea too. You'll hear Michael Livingston in our interview with him. He talked about how Robert Jordan was very technology and magic are not mutually exclusive. And I like when series play with that. And I think that fantasy and science fiction are not as clean cut as people like to think. But also you have to define your story. In The Expanse, it would have felt silly to have something like this, right? But in this show, we, from the beginning, have had something a little bit magical about it. I don't think that this show has been a pure hard science fiction, as people make that distinction, hard and soft science fiction. Hard is going to have all the science details and try to be very realistic. Soft is going to be like, and then they invented this to do that, right? But I don't think that this show was ever hard sci-fi. I think that this was always something that was going to focus more on character moments, focus more on telling the story than it was going to on giving you a manual on how to do this.
And this is a distinction from Asimov, who was a committed humanist.
Mm-hmm.
And was
right.
He was culturally influenced by his Judaism.
Yeah, there's no question that Asimov is not the showrunner.
Fair point.
Right? So,
fair point.
So this is, if he would have adapted this for television, I think you probably wouldn't see a lot of the magic that we've seen in this show. We just have to call it out. This is a show with magic.
Yes.
That's what
the vault is magic.
The vault is absolutely magic, right? I don't understand how someone can project their mind 100 years into the future and a person can see her and she can see the person, they can have a conversation.
Yeah.
So to me, that's, until you can explain that scientifically, that's magic. And I'm willing to go for the ride. I'm totally on board with it. But of course, I don't have as much affection for the original source material. So,
and I'm perfectly happy to have them be two separate things. If I sounded otherwise, then I was overspeaking it. But I just find it interesting. I find it interesting to set them side by side because comparing them reveals that much more about the underpinnings of the series that we're
Right.
watching and how people are interpreting that. I will bring up an objection, though. They are going to have to be careful with this whole magic thing, because if you don't have some kind of recognizable limits, then there ceases to be any
anything can
tension.
be everything, right?
Anything can be everything, and it's
Yeah.
kind of meaningless. The vault just shows up, and suddenly the whole population of Terminus is rescued. That came really close to jumping the shark for me. I gotta say. I don't feel like they prepared us for that enough.
Well, you knew it was bigger on the inside, right? I think
Sure, there was room enough for it, but how?
yeah.
All I needed was for Harry to tell Director Cermak one line when they were having that little one-on-one
Right.
to say, like, well, Director Cermak, your job's not done. Let's go. And then you leave it vague. But I just needed a little bit of a thing, as opposed to seeing the Invictus crashing onto the surface. And then magically everybody's flying through space and they pick up Brother Constant.
And one little flash off in the corner when we're watching Polly kneeling there expecting to be overwhelmed. And some people caught that. Well, I didn't.
Oh, I missed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, maybe that's my feeling. But still, you need to give us a little more reassurance. And then the other thing was tell him. They already had her jumping into Josiah at the time of her death. Is she, in fact, truly gone?
Right.
Yeah.
And fortunately, at least we implied that there were some limits to her abilities, because Gail was able to do the whole switcheroo and save Harry and all the rest of it.
And just took a slap to get her out of Gail, right?
Well, I'm
took a slap from
seriously.
Selmer Hardin. That warden
Seriously.
slap, that's a powerful drug.
I'm telling you.
Well, look, if this show is going to go on 10 seasons, they would absolutely bring Talon back. And
No.
And it's very, very few shows do that now. It's like we have a set, there's going to be 5 seasons, or there's going to be fewer. Very, very few
Goyer
shows
wants
do that.
8.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is 8.
If this was ER, they would absolutely do that.
Right. And that's a show that's in existence for itself, as opposed to a show like this, or Breaking Bad, or Mad Men kind of strayed a little bit light. But when the director knows the final shot, or Succession, we know what we want to achieve with this story. We have a beginning, middle, and end, where ER has no end. It just continually
I feel like we should probably call out that they do have wiggle room. I feel like the story that they told on the screen was that Tellum is gone. What does the boy say? The boy says something. I can feel her weakening.
I feel her.
And
I feel her dying with me.
Yeah, right. So that's sort of like, we saw her die, quote unquote, and yet we didn't really see.
No,
we didn't really see her die, right? So
we did not, and we saw a lot of focus on that blonde girl.
Sure.
Yes, we did.
A lot of focus on that
Yep.
blonde girl,
Yep.
and no explanation of, yes, you're now in charge of instruction until we return from our great cycle beyond.
I know that we're short on time, but Marilyn, you put one thing in your notes that I was really curious about, and that is the theme of memory.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have my question asked when the guys interviewed David Goyer, as to why memory was so much of a threat, and was there any personal link? And he talked very movingly about the fact that his mother had dementia, and that got him thinking about a lot of things
Interesting.
related to memory.
Yeah.
And it just since my mother had dementia too, and a whole bunch of my family members, I was very keyed to that topic as well. So you have probably unanswered questions, like, if your memories are altered, are you still the same person?
Right.
And if your only memories are those of a being that lived before you, how can you become your own individual? Can you become your own individual? I think initially Cleon's idea was no. But human nature being what it is, even cloned human nature, I think he was kind of naive about that. It wasn't going to happen that way. And for Demerzel, what's it like to have a memory that stretches back for 10,000 years and you can't forget a single thing?
I was curious
appalling.
about that, because there's this line that she says, Cleon the First kind of sets this whole path in motion, right? and he coerces her into serving and loving him, right? Then she has this line. She says, over time, his memory was able to convert the coercion into communion.
Yeah.
That's very authentic. That's what memory does. Memory will...
Human memory.
Yes, human memory will reorganize things to something you can live with.
Right.
And this is in memory studies, we call this distantiation. No, we call this instrumentalization. Distantiation is it can be very benign. You just can't remember everything. Some things just get lost to the passage of time. You have a limited selective memory. What Cleon the First does is instrumentalization. What he does is he takes a memory and he distorts it in service to a particular aim. And over time, his memory is altered in order to uphold his identity. So sometimes a memory is altered and you lose identity, and sometimes in order to maintain your identity, you have to alter the memory. And so your memories are always shifting. As a human, your memories are always evolving over time. And then they kind of become rigid over time. Demerzel does not have this problem.
No, she doesn't.
So to have that juxtaposed, to have his limited human memory, distorted human memory juxtaposed against her pristine memory, I think that they did that beautifully.
I think that'll be interesting when we've got a digital Harry in the vault and we have a corporeal Harry. Jury's still out whether he's robot or human. But now we have another control group here. We're not even a control group. We just want to say another instantiation of mirrors of each other. One is digital and has some higher degree of fidelity than the other. Yeah. And now these are the three most powerful beings in the universe.
We're going to have to see those two meet up at some point, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And
also,
they got the prime radiance.
Can I add another layer of complication, which is that living Harry has not had his memories altered. Left-hand Harry has had his memories redacted.
Yes, he has.
That's right.
So he has a perfect memory, but it's also been purposefully altered.
Rather like the Cleons.
But he's also able to he's able to logic out where the gaps in his memory are when faced with the question of why don't I know this? Right? When he's presented with a known unknown or an unknown unknown, right? He's able to go, why is this? Why don't I know this?
Right.
Which is an interesting thing.
But I also find myself wondering if the prime radiant that Vault Harry gave to Demerzel is accurate. Could he have
It's the same prime radiant, isn't it?
But could he have made another one that isn't quite the same?
Oh, a little flim flam, little.
You're right. Exactly.
Like Vault Harry made another prime radiant and gave it to Demerzel.
Why did he give her the keys to the kingdom, as it were?
I mean, if I'm going to speculate, I kind of think he wanted her to know you're going to be free at some point. There's going to be no empire to be loyal to at some point.
Or he views her.
So what does that do to her programming?
Yeah, he views her as someone who is not as loyal to Empire as Day thinks that she is. Like here's a being that will definitely outlast Empire, and maybe is not necessarily going to. Her life's not going to end when the Empire falls.
So this goes into the question of what does Harry know about Demerzel? I would say that he knows that she's a robot. I don't know that he knows who she is, as in her iRobot identity, right? From the robot series stuff. But then does he understand the programming that she's been installed with that keeps her locked into being a servant, to serve the Cleonic dynasty? Does he know that? I don't know. Because if he's trying to use her as a tool, then he may be that may be a flawed stratagem because he doesn't have enough information about how Demerzel's motives actually operate.
See, initially I thought he was giving her the prime radiant because he knew that there was a very high percentage chance that Terminus was about to be destroyed. And he wanted the prime radiant to survive.
And he does say that, right?
Somehow.
Right.
And yet, I can't see why he would trust her as an honest agent, if you will.
Sure.
I also think that it's possible that Vault Harry wanted a level of privacy from the Second Foundation, knowing that one
That's
is out
an
there.
interesting idea,
Ooh.
John.
Because he knew that, he already had a visit from Salvor Hardin, a passing ghost. Who's the next person who's going to pop up and who's watching him?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, was it in your interview or was it somewhere else that I heard Goyer say or imply that the two Harrys were going to actually switch places? And so Vault Harry
That was
now
in
going to be
I
Second
think, the Bald
Foundation.
Move interview.
Okay.
Which was, he was suggesting that perhaps now that nobody knows that the Terminoans, termites, survived, that the first Foundation would play the role of the Second Foundation of being the secret, balancing act, rather than the Second Foundation, which will now be more in the open than the first Foundation. So
And yet we have 7
switch.
planets that are Foundation, even though they're not Terminus.
Right. Scientism.
Yeah.
Or they've adopted
Yeah.
Terminus.
Are all the Terminites
Scientism.
going to just go dark somewhere in some even further outer reach planet? I have difficulty imagining that.
But then that would, I think that would erode the adaptation and the inspiration of the original story, which is where we have Asimov positing different modalities for the human species to continue to exist into the future.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts, 3 different forces in balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Ultimately, because there's a whole other thing that happened. I don't even want to talk about it.
But do we even have Empire in season 3? Because in Gale's flash forward, the mule says, "You're from the age of Empire," before Hober Mallow.
Right.
So does Empire even exist in season 3, or at least in that flash forward of season 3?
I don't think it does. At least not as we have seen it.
But I want Lee Pace. But then again,
I think you'll still have Lee Pace, but he's just going to be ruling the planet of Trantor.
Yeah, well, I think once Demerzel is free from her programming, there's not going to be an unsnapped neck on Trantor. But I'm not so sure about that. But yeah, I don't know what we're going to see in season 3, and I hope it's very different, because season 2 kind of promised me that.
Right.
Yeah. Can I bounce back to religion again really fast, because I discovered something that I really
and then I want to tack back to
about.
Anthony right after this.
I mean, David, you've been educating us all on the Bhagavad Gita.
A tiny bit, and I'm not even an expert on the Bhagavad Gita, which is
but you spotted it. Spotted it. And this is what I'm seeing in terms of how the show is handling religion generally. They keep putting in all these different references to religions that are familiar to us here on Earth. The one thing that I caught on the second viewing, which was so exciting to me, one of the locals said that Siwena has a thunder god. Or I guess it was Polly and Constant or Polly was telling Constant this.
Mm-hmm.
And the cleric who died, in advance of them,
who got strung up before,
from thunder, was hung on a cross in the shape of a Norse rune for protection from enemies.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
I just think that is so cool. I would love to know if all that was intentional.
It was,
or if I'm just imposing my own ideas.
It almost certainly was intentional.
Almost certainly was.
I can't imagine it wouldn't have been, and I just think that's cool. I mean, it was a little kind of a disconnect to see a Norse deity being represented in a desert community, but whatever. It was still fun and it was still cool.
I mean, even to the point that they even went to detail to the point of the banyan tree with the strangler vines. That was a metaphor.
Right.
So they do that. They go there.
And I have to say this, although I don't think I've heard anybody else say this. The fact that in the vault, when you enter into the vault and you're invited to take food with Harry Seldon, it comes from his own molecules.
Of Harry Seldon. Yeah.
And there we are. Eat. This is my body.
Yeah. That's right.
And he almost said exactly that.
And you taste delicious, Harry.
In that scene.
Well, and it's wine. I mean, it's not subtle at all, right?
Hello.
It's not subtle at all.
Well, it's not subtle for those who are familiar with Christian practice. I mean, I think that's one of the things I love is I've just listed how many 6 different we've got the Tanakh, we've got Take Eat This As My Body, we've got feminist spirituality, we've got Norse mythology. I mean, they're just really
Well,
putting it in
Marilyn,
everywhere.
if you ever do decide to want to write a paper on the season 2, the religions representative season 2 of Foundation, we'll publish it on our website, and happy to platform you. But I want to tack really quickly, since you brought up the Bhagavad Gita. Anthony, for one of his notes, has this quote: "The only way you can conquer me is through love, and there I am gladly conquered," which is a line that I believe Vishnu says to Krishna on the eve of the battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas.
And I think that, is it Glaywin, or how do I say it?
Glaywin?
Is that the way?
Glaywin.
Okay. So I think Glaywin says that's his favorite line. And I think that this was a great window into the problem of empire, because if you look at what the ancients thought of as love relationships was more along the lines of devotion. And so, when we think love, we think romance, which of course totally works for these characters because they're husbands. In an ancient context, the higher power is connected to the lower power asymmetrically, but it's not necessarily like a romantic thing. It's a devotion thing. I'm loyal to you, and in turn, you will protect me, right? This is exactly Empire's problem. Empire's problem is it's got its tentacles so far out. They have no relationship with these outer planets, these outer galaxies. They've got no way to be able to either protect them or receive love from them. And this is exactly the problem that Rome had. Rome gets too wide, too dispersed, and then the core collapses. And the reason why that is because Caesar, how can you love Caesar if you have no contact with Caesar? You go back to these old love relationships, politically speaking, it's about devotion. But you get too wide, you get too big, you get too thin, and things just collapsing on themselves.
It makes me think of two things. One, whenever Day or Dusk or anybody tries to go off planet, Demerzel is like, no, not a good idea. You've got to stay here. But then it makes me think of The Crown season 1, when the young couple, what are they out doing? They're out visiting the colonies, right? The English monarchy sends out representatives on a regular basis for people to do what? Show their devotion. And I was recently working with a client of mine in my personal, normal life business day thing, not podcasting. And we were going through some stuff, and we found some old relics of one of her distant, not too distant family members, who had all this devotive material of when she saw Elizabeth in Nova Scotia, as it was, this letter, and she wrote on the program. She wrote a note to herself, but to Elizabeth, saying, "I've been waiting to see you for so long. I can't believe the day is actually here," etc., etc., etc. Devotion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So devoted to this idea of the monarch.
Yeah, that's how the body politic reinforces collective identity, which is exactly the problem with Empire. Empire can no longer do it. And it was only a matter of time before they were not just unloved, they were hated.
Well, it reminds me even of, I'm going to bring it back to Star Wars episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The Jedi show up on Tatooine, they go up to Watto, they're like, "Hey, slavery's illegal here." And he's like, "Cool, bye." Like, you guys have too big of a republic. You can't do anything out here. We don't take your credits.
Right.
And that's the beginning of the end for this republic.
Sure. Yeah.
The thing that I find so fascinating about that representation of relationship, whether it's between deity and worshiper or between human beings, in my experience, love does not protect. Love accompanies. And for a long time, that more transactional piece was very much an operation for, well, if you're a decent god, then I pray to you and you prevent my crop from getting washed away, or you prevent our village from getting sick, or whatever. And sometimes it happened and sometimes it didn't. And the religious question then was, what did we do wrong? And who's, even more harmfully, who is the false one among us who needs to be killed?
Right.
So that we can get back in right relationship with our deity. And it leads to all sorts of complications. But that's more of a, Anthony, you're calling it a social transaction kind of religion in a way.
There's an ancient,
Not
yeah,
the
right.
same
There's an
thing as
ancient
devotion.
Right. There's an ancient Hittite treaty that says, it sort of details the vassal's relationship to the suzerain. And basically what it's saying is, look, if my tribe gets wiped out, who is going to be there to love you? And the reason that language is being used is not because sort of any modern idea of affection. It's about, you sat at my table, you ate with me, and so now when your tribe's in peril, I will send the wrath of the army against your enemies. That's what love actually means in an ancient political context. And then, of course, the Tanakh takes that and it takes that political language and it applies it to the deity instead. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting way to kind of show the bankruptcy of empire as opposed to this relationship between this asymmetrical general and his underling. But they do absolutely have a relationship, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it goes all the way through and into the Middle Ages where you have the vassal-tenant relationship.
Right.
And Christianity absolutely adopted that model.
All that love language in Christianity comes right out of Judaism, right?
But it was a complete misunderstanding in terms of the religion was not about experience so much, about exchange as it was about personal experience.
That's interesting.
But it came in the context. Yeah, the earliest Christians were not selling, a system of organizing your city, which is basically how Rome picked it up and adopted it, so that eventually you couldn't be a member of the army unless you were a Christian, which is remarkably counter to the messages as they were put down in terms of love your neighbor as yourself. But the early Christians were talking about an experience that they had. Of course, after a couple of generations, like Polly, and after a couple of generations, nobody survives who has had that experience, and therefore you have to move into a faith and belief kind of a system. And how does that get maintained? Well, prayer and results.
Ritual,
remembrance,
memory.
What you were saying earlier, Anthony, about this is who we are, this is what we do, and if we deviate from
collective identity,
trouble. Yeah.
Anyway, I love the Glaywin, and I also love the fact that they kind of pulled a switcheroo on us. Like you're pretty sure Glaywin was the one who was gonna be destroyed. And at the end of the day, he's the one that's saved. But then, of course, his husband has been destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had big internet points on Glaywin being some sort of a motivational plot device for Bel, right? Like Empire is going to take Glaywin, whatever. He was going to be used as fuel for Bel's rebellion. But no,
Well, I don't think you were wrong in that, David.
It's true.
Because it absolutely
he did believe he
fueled
was dead.
the rebellion.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. And yet he still survived that.
That's right.
But Anthony, I just love that you pulled out this one sentence, because it is so rich and it works on so many different levels.
Yeah, it's got a lot of texture. I
really hadn't seen that application to Empire until you pointed out. That's just fantastic.
I feel like we could probably talk for another hour or two on some of these topics. But what we should probably do is take a quick break. And then when we come back, we can work through some feedback. So let's do that. And we'll be right back. And we're back.
Boy, David, I can't wait for Bear McCreary to hear how I butchered his soundtrack to make an ad break.
Your 8-bit, 12 bits. What is this bit?
Let's just reduce it to nothing and put it in an ad break.
Given that they invented a whole new software and mathematical model to make the Foundation soundtrack.
It is gobsmacking.
Yeah.
Anybody who hasn't read it, go to Bear McCreary's blog and read the process he went through and other people went through to give us what we have now musically. Yeah. It's just astonishing.
Very cool stuff. Well, we've got no fancy programs here. We've got a Google Doc that has a bunch of feedback from our lovely listeners. I'm going to start reading it now, and then we can all chatter about it. So first up is Dominic P. by email, who said, I may be making a mistake, but I thought after this last episode, it was revealed to us who Gale is narrating to, which would be the Mentalics, and maybe the young ones. Her story might be useful for training the people in the Second Foundation now that it is actually in play. What do we think? Is she talking to the Mentalics?
In season 1, we got a lot of voiceover from Gale, and in this season, I think there were 2, maybe 3 episodes where we had voiceover, so they used it very sparingly. This season. I'm not sure what the creative decision making was there. However, I do remember, I believe it was on the official podcast, Goyer was asked about that. And it may have been a different podcast. I can't remember. He did say that is a good question in as much as there is a mystery that I'm not yet ready to reveal. I think this is a good theory. I think Dominic's theory is a good one. I don't have enough evidence yet we've got season 3, 4, whatever, till we might even know where this goes. But I think it's a good working theory for now.
Yeah. Cool. Anybody else?
Well, I can think of bits and pieces of things that she said. In particular, you wouldn't exist if, these particular pairs of people had met through time and whatever, that I'm not sure really relates to the Mentalics that much.
I think we'd have to go back and get all her voiceovers in one spot, and we could maybe make some clues.
I mean, maybe it's egotistical of me, but I just always thought she was talking to the audience. So,
yeah.
I mean, a simple answer would be a child or her child, right?
Other than Alas
Salvor, yes.
Right. Maybe she's talking to Anthony.
I always thought she was talking to me.
Yeah, me too.
All right.
Oh, what is that line from? 1776. Marvelous play. The clerk of Congress. You can cut this out if it's irrelevant. Clerk of Congress, the one who always reads the letters to Congress that George Washington sends. And he says, for the last couple of months, I've had the oddest feeling that he's been writing to me.
That's funny. All right, next up is Ruma T, who says, hello, David and John. Love listening to your podcast because of how you break things down. Keep up the great job. Thanks, Ruma T. Just wondering about Foundation's Demerzel and the Prime Radiant. Do you think the Prime Radiant will help her repair herself in the same way Kale helped Harry? I think I'll pass it to Anthony first because he didn't get a chance to give his thoughts on the last one.
Yeah. I'll be honest about this. I kind of feel like the little aspirin pill that is placed into Demerzel's neck is a little bit contrived. I don't buy that she can't access it or reprogram it. I don't know why. I feel like that. I understand why we need the limits. We need limits because you can't tell a story without the limits. And this is one of those cases where I don't understand the technology, and I don't think we're supposed to understand the technology at this point. I don't see how the Prime Radiant will help her solve the little poison pill in the back of her neck. So
the tic-tac.
Anyway, yeah, the
change
tic-tac.
the world.
The Tic Tac that
Mentos.
keeps
It's a
her from
Mentos.
harming people and keeps her breath fresh all day long.
No wonder she's able to seduce all the
Sure,
Cleons.
there you go.
With Tic Tacs.
Mm-hmm. Ruma continues, I was wondering if that's possibly another reason Dark Harry gave it to her, because it's something Calais had a part of. Maybe Dark Harry wants to be the second foundation too, but by giving her the Prime Radiant, she can now communicate with Calais as well. We have not seen Calais since very early in the season.
Yeah.
What is the mystery of Calais? How is she involved in this? Anyone have thoughts on where we're going with that story?
Well, I thought that at some point somebody said that the reason why Calais showed up there was because her mathematics were so deeply involved with the creation of the Prime Radiant.
But Calais was flesh and blood, according to Gale.
Right. Well,
so there's something more
this
than
is
that.
One of those magic come technological.
No, she wasn't flesh and blood because they didn't have any sensor readings.
That's right.
When Harry
That's
showed
right.
up, they had a reading of Harry, but no one else.
But didn't Gale shake her hand?
Yes.
Maybe she's another robot.
Yeah.
Could be, yeah.
And I believe it would be a good idea for us to keep in mind too of what Calais' math was about. I believe if correct me if I'm wrong, was folding space, wasn't it?
Right.
And Bell says to Empire today, once space is folded, or I forget what the exact line is, but basically
it stays folded.
Yeah, that's the line. So I think there's more yet to unfold from that little mystery. But yeah, they certainly left that one wide open from this season. They did not at all explore that any further.
All right.
Well, I'm still hoping that it was a fake that he gave her.
Yeah.
With intention to deceive.
I kind of like having Demerzel have a real Prime Radiant, though. I think that would be super interesting to have the second primary foundation, the be connected to Demerzel, be connected to Empire, or whatever is left of Empire post Cleon.
I guess it depends on, does Harry trust Demerzel, and if so, why?
You could trust her because her I mean, if you knew what her programming was, you could absolutely trust her.
And does he?
I mean, that's the question. I mean,
yeah.
Something we didn't talk about was the whole the trap that Demerzel is in, and the fact that her function is to serve the genetic dynasty. What happens when the dynasty isn't there, or is so degraded, or doesn't have the resources, or there's a shortcoming in what her directive is?
And I think the question is,
what is the robot going to do?
The question isn't whether he trusts her. Does he trust her to destabilize something that he needs deconstructed? Because she would be a really good tool with that. But that's quite a bold play, because she's not.
He made a bold play with the spacers.
Yeah, that's right.
That was as bold a play as you can make.
Yeah, I mean, she's a super intelligence, and now she's got all the information. So,
and she'd be awfully hard to trick.
Exactly.
Particularly in a mathematical model kind of creation. It's just at the very end there when she's saying, I'm seeing all kinds of beautiful things. And, you can interpret that a whole number of ways.
Right.
But she has had, 600 years to contemplate how she might get out of the trap that she's in. So,
And she hasn't gotten out of it yet.
But maybe she is approaching a solution and the Prime Radiant will help her.
That's a good point. Well, which goes to Ruma's email, I think.
Or she think it will help her.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on to Arthur H., who wrote in via email saying, just finished listening to your review of episode 9. So this was before the episode 10 podcast, but we put it to the season wrap because it was really dense. Starts off, you made reference to the Campbell dynasty. I don't remember that from the books. The prequel books were read by me many years ago, but I can't help think that this is an homage to John W. Campbell, the author of Who Goes There, which was adapted for film as The Thing from Another World, who was also editor of Astounding Stories and one of Asimov's earliest editors. Anyone familiar with this Campbell character?
I'm wondering if that was reference, the Campbell dynasty, as they're saying in the email, was reference to something when I was talking about the previous dynastic orders.
Yeah, I don't think it was Campbell. I think this might have just been mishearing.
Yeah, possibly. But it's still, I think it's an interesting poll when you can find, we can trace backwards.
Marilyn?
I'm just wondering if the Campbell dynasty refers to the very early science fiction writings. And Campbell was a great mover and shaker in that, and so created a quote-unquote dynasty of sci-fi writers that influenced Asimov. That was how I understood it, but I'm probably way off.
So Anthony just had to step out because he had something going on at home, but we are very grateful that he made the time to speak with us on this season wrap-up. Marilyn, however, is still with us, so we're going to keep going on this feedback with her. The next point from Arthur H's email was, one of my favorite things about Asimov, which I'm not sure is coming through in this adaptation, is that before Asimov, all science fiction was basically big, strong men build bigger and bigger weapons to blow up their enemies. Read Jules Verne, the Skylark of space, etc. Asimov's heroes were scientists and thinkers, and as we saw in the books, it didn't matter how big and bad the Empire was, Selden out-sciences them. The idea that the heroes go all the way to Trantor in the first half of Foundation and Empire to try and defeat Belrios, only to find out that the power of psychohistory took care of it. A weak general would be no threat to the Foundation. A strong general would set his sights on the throne of Empire. Either way, the Foundation wins. And they could have just stayed home and had a mani-pedi. My thesis for this is that Asimov created the nerd hero. He made Hermione, Tom Swift, and many others possible. Marilyn, what do you think about that?
I love the nerd hero. I think that's really great. And I agree with him. This is one of the reasons why I loved the Foundation series so much, is that Asimov's values of humanism and, rejecting violence as a solution, violence is the last resort of the incompetent. This show is not exactly firmly rooted in that, let us say, although they did use the sentence at one point.
Yes.
But yeah. I don't think this is the driving model that they're going with, because they want to have big space battles and, all this stuff.
Well, I don't know, because, this email was written after episode 9. But after episode 10, I think they may be going closer to Asimov than we thought, because the whole point of the militarization of the Foundation was to goad Empire, right? Yep. It was to make Empire be the weak one, the incompetent one with the violence. And it led to the destruction of the Imperial fleet. The super aggressive military power ended up with no fleet at all. The Foundation survived.
Right.
And
with
I think
whisper ships.
Right. The Empire no longer has the ability to jump. And so their control is effectively neutered, except for, that's one fleet. So assuming that they still have other fleets out there, but we don't know how many.
But without the spacers, the fleets are
they're
stuck with wherever they're hanging around right now. Whatever planet they're rotating around, that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll go catch up with you guys in 100 years. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, but it also, just something that Anthony was talking about earlier, it also completely cuts them off from supplying planets and, whatever sorts of benefits that they were sharing.
Yeah.
They cut off the Outer Reach because they simply weren't able or interested in doing all that sort of thing. And that's part of how the Foundation could increase its influence in the Outer Reach.
Imagine the inputs that Trantor needs, especially with the rings. I mean, you could create some degree of self-sustaining with food and some nutrients and stuff, but you're still going to need alloys and metals and minerals that are no longer available on Trantor. You need raw materials to keep that, because if you think the planetary population of Trantor is quadrupled because you have 3 rings now, which are almost probably
Mhm.
the what would be the population on the planet itself.
Hmm.
So that's a lot of humanity in one place that no longer has the ability to input, to sustain the inputs.
And the planet is not intended to grow foodstuffs and other sort of basic functions. And
Right.
this also mirrors the decline of the Roman Empire quite nicely too. They had similar kinds of issues and problems.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Relating to this, Arthur continues, the mule, one of the favorite things about the book Mule is that he cultivated the image of the big strong man while actually being something else. I don't know anything about Book Mule.
I'm sorry we lost Book Mule.
Yeah.
It's become just, another standard kind of sci-fi bad
The
guy.
Mulinator.
Unless the Mulinator, exactly. Unless, they're going to pull a fast one on us, which I would love.
Yeah, which is possible still, because I don't even know when we're going to get the mule practically. Is it going to still just be hovering out there on the edges of season 3, or when
I hope we see practical? Him. I mean, we saw the mule in therapy, right? We at the very end. So I think this could be perhaps a less big strongman mule than we thought.
I thought I heard somewhere that the mule was going to appear in the 3rd season.
Okay.
But I have to say, a second watch and listen, I'd call me crazy, but the mule's voice sounded an awful lot like Harry's voice. And he was speaking in rhyme, very much the way that Cuttley speaks in rhyme. I mean, go back and listen again and tell me that I'm crazy, because that
I think you're right. I think you're right.
And that could just be the showrunners being funny with us. But
yeah, I heard it more as just old man whisper voice, but I could be wrong about that. I mean, who knows? I mean, he and Gail are sleeping so much that I'm gonna have to start calling her Gail Snornick, and so. I don't know what he's going to be like in 100 years.
No, she's a Nana in her underworld right now, and she will return when she wakes up.
It was in episode 1 where Calais, or I forget his life partner's name, Yana. Was talking in a particular rhyme pattern to try to break his thing. So interesting that if that's a good pick. That's a really good pick. If the mule was talking in not the same rhyme necessarily, but in a similar, the writer's using a similar device in some way to give us a subtle clue. That's cool. That's a good pick.
We'll see.
Arthur closes with, thanks for the series as well as y'all's work on Earthsea. Also writes us a little parody song. Let me tell you all a story about a man named Gid. A poor Gondas man Gid barely kept his family fed. That's funny. And Wheel of Time. Haven't had a chance to watch Ahsoka or any of the other things you cover yet. Well, thanks for writing in, Arthur. This was a fun email and very deep with lore and a lot of food for thought on the nature of this adaptation and how it's playing with the themes of violence.
Yeah, glad you've been able to join us too. So
yeah. And Earthsea, I've been reading Tahanu a little bit, and I'm excited to talk about it. I think we're going to resume that in October. Jordan M. writes in and says, howdy, gents. Howdy, Jordan. Just finished a late shift and had to watch Foundation straight away. Whoa, what a ride. Early on, you realize that this show will span generations that can effectively wipe the slate clean of many a beloved character, and boy, were there some deeply moving and heroic deaths. I mean, Rios letting his hair down with Hober and sharing the shitty wine was just one of many fantastic moments in this season finale. Holy shit, the acting chops on Ben Daniels. That Rios little shimmy in the Empire flamboyant chain mail while happily saying, plus I got to shove Day out of an airlock before perishing with a toast. Priceless. Frankly, all the performances were electrifying. I felt every tear of Demerzel, every punch lunged at Day, all the sincerity of a trapped Dusk effectively looking into a mirror of a trapped Demerzel, all the brilliance of Gale, Harry, etc. Just wow. Wow. The show cooked big time. Plus, it's bigger on the inside, baby. Flabbergasted. I think Jordan liked
That's
the
a good
show.
point. That's a good point.
I got that impression. Yes, I think you're right, John.
Yeah, very very cool. Great performances all around. I will leave my nits unpicked. Also, as random as Becky's arsehole, as a Dune head, spoilers ahead. Can you tell me, David, before I read this, should I read this or not?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
But it is very Dune-y. It gets into the future books, but it's not.
Yeah,
spoiler.
I don't care about Dune spoilers. I'm never reading them.
No,
Leave it in.
I meant for the listeners, not for you.
All right. So should we skip it because it's
No,
already Dune
it's fine.
spoilery? Okay.
It's fine because
okay.
it's
The
not
book's
gonna
been out
spoil
50
anything.
years. Yeah. Okay. All right. Also, as random as Becky's arsehole, as a Dune head, spoilers ahead. I'm giving you the warning now.
Yes.
So I suddenly viewed the Cleons akin to the repetitive and traumatically cloned Dune Duncan Idahos. With the Duncans, some at times found a higher awareness of their reality with the God Emperor, and in Foundation's case, as far as we know, one Cleon found freedom. Perhaps more Cleons will find their freedom too. 3 decantations are uncharted waters, it would appear, so who knows? I do know that this show has me in a deep dive, and I can't wait for more. Here's hoping the writers and actors get everything they justly deserve, so they may continue making and profiting as merited from these amazing works of art. Go, Goyer, go. Looking forward to your coverage in the afternoon. Sante Lagar. What? I don't know what that means. Who knows?
Cheers to your health.
Oh, that's great.
health, guys.
That's great.
Yeah.
Indeed. And also with you. So that's what I'm going to say back to you, Jordan.
So Jordan, with this Dune comp, it's a good pull. It's very on point with these questions of immortality and cloning, but it also dives into this something that we didn't really get to talk about with Anthony as well. It wasn't on our roster, but it's a background thought that I've had and I've brought up a couple times, which is one of Harry's points that he brings up in season 1, which is stagnation is going to lead to the ruin of the species unless. And I don't know how this. I think this plays in the Foundation in some of the wider books and the auxiliary books, but the fact that humanity needs to have some degree of challenge and uncertainty before it in order for us to be able to continue forward. And when Herbert is playing with the Duncan Idaho character and the God Emperor and the later books, a lot of it has to do with that is them the humanity trying to get itself out of a trap of stagnation, and Duncan Idaho being used as a tool to try to pry loose at a certain point humanity from this trap. And that's the whole thing with Paul Atreides, at least from the early books, is one of the horrors that he experiences of being prescient is he can see the future. He knows not tomorrow, not next week, but he can see into a millennia, and he can see the death, horror, and destruction that the universe is headed towards. And so he's sitting there in the driver's seat thinking, dear Lord, how, I can't steer the bus from not going off the cliff. And that's really, that drives a lot of his angst. And so when we're looking at the Cleons and Harry using psychohistory to predict humans' futures, he's saying the Cleonic dynasty is like a lead weight that's dragging us down, and we're not going to be able to break free from that, unless we take sort of radical action. So lots of fun conversational elements between Dune and Foundation here. I feel like I could. Oof, I'm all. Ooh.
You could talk about it for brother days.
That's right.
Of course, the thing about the Cleons, they're more concerned with their own preservation than they are with the preservation of the human race.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Well, speaking of clones, we have a clone of one of our own hosts right now.
Email.
Marilyn R. Pukkila writes in. Would you like to read it yourself, Marilyn, or should I read your own words to you?
We should probably do some selective reading here.
Pick your top 3 paragraphs.
I think you go ahead, John, because you're very good at doing that.
All right. I'm just going to read the whole thing. Let's just do it.
Okay.
All right. Hello, Lorehounds. Hello, Marilyn.
Hello.
Well, I think I can claim a few internet points for this one. Day goes too far, and Bell revolts, taking the fleet with him, so to speak, though I didn't foresee the airlock castle smooth. I had also envisioned a general rebellion throughout the Foundation systems, but in this iteration, Spacer Rebellion is just as good. And I said that once Tellum was overcome, the folk of Ignis would follow Gale and Harry, though the kneeling part was a bit much. Not to mention that setting up of a goddess and a dying and rising god. Yes, Asimov believed that all cultures went through a religious phase, but no need to slather it on with a brush. Marilyn, what do you think about this feedback?
Should I say that it's very insightful and beautifully crafted, and all internet points are definitely worth rewarding?
Here's your voucher.
Shall I say?
Here's your voucher. I think we've discussed religion enough today on
I think so.
On this podcast, but yes, I agree with you. I think that some of it was a little bit on the nose, but I didn't mind it. I think that there was enough intrigue with the blonde woman, the young woman who was making funny faces, that I was willing to excuse any cheesiness, because I think that we needed some simple foundations, so to speak, simple foundation, so that we could have those pieces of intrigue and not have to rewatch 20 times.
Sure.
Marilyn continues. Good to see the link between Gale and Harry being formed by common purpose, shared experience, and shared loss. I think folks have been a bit harsh with Gale. She was mostly a child when she left Synax, worshipping Harry Seldon, who promptly got her into near execution and soon showed her how much his feet were made of clay. Traumatized, forbidden to love Raish in the end, set to sleep for 138 or whatever years, she wakes up to an older woman claiming to be a daughter she never gave birth to, is berated by her former mentor, etc., and almost devoured by a mentalic monster. Bit of a tough row to hoe, if you ask me, and I think she did spectacularly. Yeah, Marilyn, I gotta say, after episode 9, I was still like, oh, Gale. And then episode 10, I was much more pleased with Gale because of her whole tricking Tellum, which I think you brought up perhaps a little bit too strong, right? Perhaps Gale got a little bit too strong too quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of that, how realistic is it? But the scene where she, we've got the fuzzy lens at work when she's talking with Salvor, and Salvor is saying, hey, we got to do this and the other thing, and Gale is saying, shut up, shut up, shut up. I figured that Gale finally was doing some active steps to block Tellum in some fashion. However, she'd figured out how to do that. That's, of course, the part that's a little dicey. But the whole how they rescued Harry, not quite jumping the shark, but I thought I saw a fin or two in the water there.
You're being circled.
Right.
I would watch 3 more seasons of only Gale before I watched another episode of only Salvor. Be honest, like I much prefer Gale's storyline over Salvor's. I was just thinking about this today, David. You asked David Goyer, the other David, about his casting choices and how he was totally willing. He said, "I'm totally willing to have a man or a woman play, or any race, any national origin, doesn't matter as long as they fit the character." And yet, it seems to go completely against that Laura Harvey had to use an American accent when her accent was British.
Yeah.
It's baffling to me because I really think I would have liked the character better if her speech sounded more natural. It sounded affected. It sounded like she was doing something, that she was doing a bit. And I didn't like that. I think that's what bothered me about Salvor Hardin the whole time.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Marilyn, to hijack your comment here, but I need somewhere to soapbox about this.
No. Well,
it's your own podcast. You can soapbox all you want.
Yeah, that's right. My next paragraph does mention her, so it's very appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it feels out of line with the culture of the show, right? Is let people be themselves as long as they are embodying the character. I think that changing the accent was a very confusing decision to me.
I wonder if it was made to help distinguish Salvor from Gale.
Maybe. I don't know. Well, Gail's not British either. Gail is South African.
And something
Mhm.
else.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next paragraph of your email, Marilyn. I'm glad the folk of Terminus survived, but the trope is getting to be a bit risky, all these miraculous survivals. Besides so many devastating deaths, Belle, Hober, Salver, though in her case, she was a warden to her core, so in that way it was appropriate. And it can feel a bit arbitrary who gets plot armor and who doesn't. Yeah, one thing I'll say is I thought Salver had massive plot armor
Yeah.
until
Right.
this episode.
Which was
I
the
would've-
major twist, right?
Yeah, I would have
Yeah.
bet money that she was in the 3 that make it to the final season.
But
If
they only
not
had 2
to the end.
cryopods.
Yes.
Sure. But you could get another cryopod. Harry could design you one out of metallic grass or something. I don't know. He's a
Spit
genius,
and glue
right?
and a bunch of vines from the jungle.
Right. He could MacGyver it together. Yeah.
I don't want to sound I don't know what, but it's because it's always tried to say, oh well, go listen to this other source, but go listen to the official podcast and for the final episode, because they do talk about this very issue about choosing who and how and why, and Goyer actually relates a quite a long story and quite a long sort of anecdote about how he had the conversation with Leah Harvey, how they broke the news to her.
Oh, and
how
I
they
called her
felt-
Laura Harvey before. Sorry.
right. So there's a lot of interesting insights there if you go to the official podcast for that.
And
For the final
flashbacks
episode.
are not impossible.
Flashbacks are fine. Yep.
That's okay. I don't need any flashbacks.
What did you say? What's your quote, John? Everybody likes a trope as long as it's done well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think that's fair. And I did appreciate he said on another podcast, like, okay, yeah, we saved a bunch of people you didn't think we were going to save, but we also killed off 6 main characters in this
That's right.
episode. It's not like the losses aren't there.
Yeah.
So I do think they shouldn't do this every season. This will be terrible if they do this every season.
You got to be
But
careful.
I'm fine with them doing it this time. Just don't keep doing that.
Yeah.
Marilyn continues. Day and Sarah's escape puts me right back into the fall of the Roman Empire, which suffered from rival claimants and split dynasties as a part of its fall. Though I admit I suspected that Bel Rios would fill that role as one of many rebellious generals. Trantor versus Cloud Dominion. I'm afraid I don't feel that Dominion has much of a chance, even with so much of the Imperial fleet destroyed. I don't know. The now they have no spacers, right?
Yeah, nobody's got a chance except for the Foundation and their whisper ships. So
Yeah.
But they escape in, what do they escape in, Dominion?
a sublight. I would assume that that's a sublight. That was quite a small
So-
craft.
I think probably Trantor's got a few sublights hanging around.
Yep. But where are they going to go? I mean, were they show them going off into space? So yeah, it's a big open question.
Yeah, yeah. And where are fleets number 1 through 19 currently
Yeah, exactly.
housed and all that?
Right. Also, they had the technology on the Invictus to jump without spacers. It's just that you would have to sacrifice a person every single time.
That
Well,
would be
I know
so
it's not trivial.
hard for the Emperor
It's
to
not
do.
trivial, but-
Sacrifice a
Right,
person.
exactly.
Heaven
Exactly.
forfend.
So I guess that's the question, right? Is Empire going to go back to that old way,
That's a
or
good
have
question.
they lost the
Yeah.
technology somehow?
Right.
Mm.
Right.
Because they did blow up the Invictus. That's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Oh, yeah.
probably have they would have to, if we wanted to. I was in a thrift shop the other day and looking at some old tools and old drills and saws and things like that. And like, oh yeah, what if I didn't have my Makita cordless, right? The knowledge is out there, but it would take some time for us to reconstruct and recompile and remember the lessons learned and stuff like that. But it's embedded out there. We can do it again.
Stone knives and bearskins.
That's not, and there are people, yeah. And the amazing thing is there's whole communities of people who are into that and keep that those traditions alive, which is
Not to mention sundials. Let's not
Yeah.
forget the sundial.
Right. Marilyn finishes up saying, someone has to get in there and reset Demerzel's programming, particularly with the mule on the horizon. And how are the second Foundationers on Ignis supposed to grow and develop while Harry and Gail are in cryosleep? I feel there is at least one teaching scene we didn't get to see before their sleep couches were set up. And I'm worried about that blonde girl. Why couldn't Tellum just leap from the dying Josiah into yet another body? And how long, oh network moguls, must we wait until season 3? All the best, Marilyn.
Thanks, Marilyn, for writing in. We always appreciate your feedback.
Yeah,
I appreciate your
again.
appreciation.
I do buy that Tellum is gone because you had a very specific situation when she jumped into Josiah, which was she had just finished this, detachment life transfer ritual. She was primed to do it. And it doesn't seem like she took him over very much. She just kind of had enough influence to get him to do one thing.
That was doesn't he say that like it was like a echo of her or a remnant of her? Or
yeah,
something?
it was a tiny piece, and
yeah,
I don't know if we can believe him because he had her in there and he couldn't talk about her before, but he did say, "I feel her dying with me."
Right. So
I hope he was right.
Yeah, and that's the thing is if a show doesn't keep its word, if I can say it that way, then when anything can happen and anybody can come back from the dead, then anybody's death has no stakes.
Right.
And then
we saw that
lose
with Game of
meaning.
Thrones now, didn't we?
Yeah. And just to, to rehash, to relitigate the Walking Dead, they really did it with Glenn and the dumpster. And that's where there was a big mass exodus from the show, was from there, because it was suddenly like, why, right? Why do I care every week when you fake me out and then bring my favorite back? And then what does it mean?
Don't like being jerked around emotionally.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that,
I want to feel my feels.
Right. The vault may be coming preciously close to that. We'll see.
As Peter Frampton says, do you feel like we do? All right. Vanessa sent an email to lorehounds@thelorehounds.com where you can always get in touch with us no matter what show or topic. She says, "Hi, David and John. I didn't know where to put this, as it is a book and it's my first post for you guys. I was also disappointed by the Power of Foundation, as they definitely had invented some amazing technology, but lacked a basic understanding of Empire and relied too much on Harry. It makes sense since the religion to spread the word and hide the science actually became one. So why look beyond your God? I am sure that Constance's prayer guide me through the darkness inadvertently converted trillions of people." Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, the warehouse church did look pretty depressing.
It did.
That did make me go, ugh. And it would have made more sense to me if they were expecting to go, if they were expecting this whole explosion to happen. But David Goyer actually made clear on an interview, they didn't know that they were being saved.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know. This foundation doesn't seem to be running very well.
And again, just back to my point you made earlier, all I needed was one little scene to set that up. And that would have been fine. That's a lot of people to get into the little vault, the doorway is a little bit narrow. And yeah, when we see the street scenes of Terminus, it's a dusty, horrible looking place after how many years they've been there, and they're still living sort of just barely above a Quonset hut level of, temporary shelter. It's seems like a pretty grubby existence to live on Terminus.
Right. See, that all makes sense to me because of the books. Mm-hmm. They had one time when one person delivered a line about a scarcity of metals on this planet. And that was a major part of Selden's whole thought process. Was because minerals were so scarce, they were forced to develop a miniaturized technology.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And they were churning out all kinds of different devices, including the much-loved atomic ashtray.
Right.
It was the 1940s. What can we say?
Yeah.
So as a book reader, that knowledge is there for me, and so it doesn't bother me as much.
Got it.
I also think that we saw the Foundation at one of those nexus points where there were a whole bunch of people that were all ready to gear up for war.
Yep.
And if that's what you're ready for, then you're not going to spend money on upgrading your
luxuries,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you particularly if you have limited resources.
Good point.
You're going to put a poster up of Harry the Riveter and make sure that everyone's ready.
She who rivets.
Oh boy.
But still, they develop whisper ships and personal auras, and so they're getting it in. They're getting it in.
Right. Right.
But
well, Vanessa continues. Who talked about worlds, darkness, and hopelessness? Bell. He did become part of an atrocity, but he knew that he was about to become part of one.
Yeah, no, I like this idea that there's a point here of this issue is Bell is acting with state authority. Right. He is, and it's part of the order and control of the universe. And if the Emperor says, destroy this planet, it's part of the order of things versus the darkness and the hopelessness, which is the disorder with warlords and slavery and where the weak become, I forget what Bell says, but basically they just become objects and become preyed upon by those who have power. But yet, well, what's better, having the Empire order a lawful extermination of an entire planet or to be, living under a warlord society? What's better there? I don't know. And the fact that Bell is at the nexus of those two not balancing forces, but those two forces that are in operation in the universe is interesting. I think it's an interesting conundrum for him to be in.
Right.
I think he even says, he had hoped that, quote unquote, just destroying one planet would satisfy Day. It was when Day announced, no, we're gonna wipe them all out.
Right.
That he said, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Vanessa continues. Demerzel figured out that Dusk and Rue discovered her secret, i.e. she had some type of alarm system. Simply Safe is another... I'm just kidding. We're not doing it here.
No sponsor. No, not sponsored.
She decides to leave Day, told him why, and expects that he will be killed by Bell. Thus, why she picked him. I am sure that he is more vulnerable even with his aura and guards. She seemed to have tears in her eyes as she watched Terminus be destroyed, not because she left Day, but the dynasty will be over sooner, rather than later, as the mule is only 150 years away from this moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, this is something we talked about earlier, right? Is there even going to be an Empire in season 3?
Right. And this idea of what emotions does Demerzel experience, and does she authentically, spontaneously experience emotions, or are they only in relationship? Does she have only an emotional response when she's interacting with other human beings? Which, interesting, now that I think about it, when she rips her face off in season 1, that's a pretty hey, I'm by myself. I'm not performing for anybody here. And I'm having an emotional reaction to the point that I'm ripping my skin off. That's a pretty strong reaction.
And even when she's talking to Brother Dawn, she's not loudly crying. He can't tell she's crying, but she's tearing up and she's becoming very emotional about this. Again, we could question, is this because of the chip, of the Tic Tac? But it could be genuine, too. I think she does feel genuinely motherly affection to this Dawn.
Right.
I think she feels that way to all the Dawns, because each Dawn is a new possibility for bringing things back into alignment. And if she can have that kind of relationship with the Dawn, maybe, just maybe, the Day will be of a little better quality. But I keep thinking back to first season and the fact that she walked the spiral. Granted, it was 10,000 years ago, but she never forgets anything, right? And that Halima says to her, I think you do have a soul. I think we're meant to remember those things. And
we will definitely, because we see her little bracelet and the little salt crystal a couple of times in this season.
I'm not remembering where it was, the one scene where she really seizes it very tightly at one point. Do you guys remember which one that was?
I don't remember the scene, but I remember.
I think she seized it when... No, I lost it. Just go on. Just go on.
Well, write in and tell us, listeners. And, as I say, I'm going through.
Post it on the Discord. Post it on the Discord.
There we go. There we go. If you have access to the Discord, yes, let us know which scene that was.
Vanessa continues. So we've had many balls in the air for this story. We have the Spacers, as they did something for Hober, which he noticed when they took the cuffs off him. I don't know why he antagonized an unstable day. Maybe he has a crazy plan like going to Trantor. I believe that he wanted to get them out of their cell, and he is overconfident and does not think about consequences. However, I find him to be extremely intelligent, which is necessary to be a good con man, but could make him short-sighted. We also have the thing that switches bodies, and combine all this with so much grief and anger from Bell, Constant/Hober. Who knows what will happen today, but I think the Spacers are coming in for the win. Well, good job on your predictions.
Internet
Points to the max. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you
You
visit
win,
our
Vanessa.
Discord server, we'll send you an emoji with internet points. This is too long already, but that sound that Salver used to save Gale may have broken whatever hold that Tellum used to keep all the Mentalics under her thumb. Between the tears from Ahsoka and the tears of excitement over this episode, it was a great week of television. Thanks for everything you do, Vanessa. Yeah, it's been a great week in television, and Wheel of Time has also been really good. So I hope you'll join us over there if you want more great TV.
As we're recording this, there's chatter in the Discord at how good the Ahsoka episode 6 is tonight. So,
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. Okay.
Well, I think it's time we do our show notes now,
Yes.
because we got to get over to this.
We got TV to watch here, guys. Come on.
We got our other show to watch. All right, David, we did already record everything for this podcast, but we've discovered a couple other feedback emails that we wanted to fit in. I know
Yes.
Duve wrote in a nice long email, and Kim M sent the email to a different email address other than that's inactive. So we got it now that it's come through our contact form, and we're going to do those both now.
yes. And for Duve, that was my fault because I pasted his feedback into the into the Wheel of Time feedback document and not the so
The wheel weaves.
Yes, it does. All right. So to kick us off on this special segment, Lore Master and friend of the pod, Duve71, says, "Hi, John and David. First, thanks for the outstanding coverage of Foundation this season, particularly with having to juggle 3 other big shows at the same time, plus all the other side projects you've got on the boil. As a loyal Patreon supporter, I salute you." And we salute you, sir. Thank you
Indeed.
so much. On this episode, on this email, to keep it fairly short, it's like 10 paragraphs. He
I
says
know.
it's going to keep it short. I'll just do a combined episode 10 and season feedback. Otherwise, you'd be editing this for brevity. I was much more on the John end of the spectrum of enjoying the season finale. And whilst there were nits to pick, I've adopted a more sanguine approach to my genre content, as long as you don't, quote unquote, lost me, as in the television show Lost. I'm cool with a few show and writing gymnastics to get us to a conclusion. This season felt distinctly different from season 1, which felt a little bit more cerebral. This season was the action season, in my humble opinion. I've mentioned before, this isn't a bad thing per se. Apple have invested a lot of bucks into this. And if casual viewers tune in for epic space battles or for a bit of Lee Pace thirst and then stay, then I'm okay with it if it gives David S. Goyer the ability to deliver this story to a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I
100%.
think that you need some candy to bring people in.
I noticed that the trailers and teasers and all that stuff, the pre-media hype stuff, was much more full of explosions and dramatic action. And so I think that's very much in line with that, is like entice people in. So in totality, this season and the way you guys got access to screeners has been really ramped up, the ability for us viewers to indulge in some great speculation. And it's a real treat to hear some of our weird and wonderful ideas come either to fruition or get completely trashed with a brilliant blindside from the showrunners. Mark Lee. A couple of things from this finale. I am leaning towards a more sci-fi concept for how the Vault saved Foundation. In the show, it really looked like the population went up with the destruction of Trantor. We even had an image of Polly kneeling as the ground erupted around him. So I think the Vault has already digitally stored the Foundation. Okay, this is an interesting thought. And who we are seeing are the digital copies of the population. As you'll constantly say, we don't know the capabilities of the vault, and it's timey-wimey, TARDIS-like, bigger on the inside than on the outsideness. It could explain how it was able to save everyone. Let's see what completely out of the blue explanations we get or not get. As I said, this is a wondrous, this is the wondrous nature of the show. We can come up with completely outlandish theories, and it's all part of the fun. Thoughts?
I could shut this down right now with a post on David Goyer's website.
Okay.
But, if you want to keep believing, Duve, go ahead. But if not, so if you want to keep believing, skip ahead a minute. But I will tell you that there was a scene that I discussed in the wrap up, in the main body of the wrap up, about how they had Polly kind of questioning Harry, and that was supposed to be on New Terminus, which was a new planet that they were settling with the vault. And I guess it was too expensive for them to film a whole new planet. But yeah, I don't think they're digital. I think that they were very intended to be physical.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to over litigate the thing, but yeah, that was one of the things, was like, okay, and like Duve says, it's fine. I'm fine with where we ended up. I don't have any problem with the destination of all the characters' endpoints in this season. Yeah. So
yeah.
Goodbye, Josiah. We barely knew thee. I'm taking John's comment of the USB knife. Josiah's essence lives and will become the mule.
Okay.
With that bit of tell him along for the ride.
I don't remember saying this, but thanks for the credit.
Remember how horrified she was when confronted with the mule when Gale took her to the future. A bit of recognition? Question mark, question mark. Straws being clutched at. I need those internet points. All right, so he's putting out a big bet here. Will the mule be some sort of Josiah tell him?
Fine. I want Josiah. You know what? I want the mule to be someone completely unrelated. And my favorite writing with this would be if the mule was forged into the monster he is by fear of Gale, and Gale only was chasing him because of her vision of the future, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy and time loop that created a monster and created this adversarial relationship.
Right. I'm not going to say too much more because I do have a distant memory of the echo of the books, and I don't want to get my speculation and preferences to be sort of woven in with the books. So I'll just I'm happy to go along for the ride with the mule, see what they bring us. But I do agree that it'd be fun to bring in a completely outsider. So
let's get muley with it.
There, very good. Lee Pace killed his part as Day this season, building on the great work of season 1. The Days we've seen have increasingly become erratic, petulant, and childlike, stuck repeating past mistakes, but just on a larger scale. Lee Pace was definitely channeling some Tyler Durden, old man movie Fight Club energy in his fisticuffs with Bel Rios, and the payoff of the castling device was perfect.
Yeah, I agree. That was a great death for this day, was thinking that he won and then just being outside of a ship.
And going back, it kind of mirrors in the season, right? So the first thing that we see, the second thing that we see Lee Pace doing is fighting off the blind angels. And so for his character to go out in that same fashion, I think is a nice bit of storytelling.
Yeah, so I think that's right. Yep.
With Sarah, and Lee Pace, boy, I would love to see him awarded some recognition for his work, because his character
is a treasure.
This season. Absolutely, and he's grown. I think I feel I have a sense that as the actor individual Lee Pace, he has grown in his ability to act. His craft has improved because of this performance, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I think people, even if he was respected before this, I think this has been a big showcase of his talents. I know my wife has been into him since Thronduil. And
right. That's right.
Insane.
Thronduil, yeah.
He was really like, it was an odd portrayal in a good way. You know, he was very like spooky and
he was a jerk,
mysterious. Yeah. But like the way he like moved his face was very alien almost. And
Interesting.
it was a really cool performance, and he's got to show more of his range here.
Yeah, for sure. With Seraphin Dawn on the lam, I am keen to hear what Marilyn and Anthony make of a new power base emerging to threaten Empire based on their child. I don't think we really got into that, especially since we're recording well after the fact. He continues, we've got a lot of analogous history of the usurper, and we'll need some scholarly takes, I think, to ruminate on while we wait for the studios to grow some ethics. Indeed, there are plenty
the
of
paper from Marilyn, right?
Right. We need to turn our actual lorehounds.com website into an academic publishing clearinghouse.
There you go.
For all of our scholarly articles. Yeah, season 3, who knows? And yeah, there's plenty of historical analogs. So continuing, we saw the destruction of the entire 20th fleet at Trantor. Now, I don't expect that wipes out the full military capabilities of Empire, but it must leave a serious vacuum, especially around Terminus. Maybe the 20th was the quote-unquote home fleet. We know Dominion has its own power base, plus other planets on the rim. I wonder how Terminus will fare with potential enemies surrounding them. I think the big thing here is no spacers.
Yeah, so they're going to have to go at the speed of, whatever they can
near
do.
light. Yeah, as fast as they can go. So, yeah, that's going to make things a lot more difficult for Foundation or for Empire to manage all the things they've got.
Or they set up a draft of people to do the one-time spacer deal, which will, I think that'll make them lose supporters pretty quick.
Or the spacers become Chom, which is the in Dune, that is the faction that controls folding space. And then they are just a giant commercial outfit. They're like a giant petroleum company or something like that has global
Did you say
domination.
Dune? I've never heard of that.
No, is it interesting? That's it's a little known work out of the 60s.
How you doing? All right.
Final feedback. Just give me more and more Demerzel and robot lore. What is the mental toll on her? She is having to carry out her directives even when it's obviously contrary to what she'd like to do. She is a sentient being with real feelings, and to look at the facial tics and the hand wringing she is doing when she's telling Dawn how she will have to hunt him down. This is taking a toll, and I'm sure we're going to see some more of this in the coming seasons. I've added some papers and articles at the end of this email from academics about the potential negative effects of giving robots sensations and emotions. It's interesting, but also terrifying, particularly if we put robots into hazardous or demeaning situations. We don't have a great track record as a species when we have a class of beings subservient with little agency. Yeah, Johnny, he lists several articles here. I don't know if we want to try and do something with those. We certainly don't have time to run those down right now. Maybe I'll throw those into the Discord, the Foundation channel Discord.
That sounds good.
I can do that right now. Wraps up still so much to chew over. Oh, well, and I did want to go back to one thing. And we didn't really talk about this in the breakdown, but I was thinking about this. That final goodbye that Dawn says to Demerzel, I hope you're happy. I truly do. Ooh, I'm going to get chills here in a second. And he goes, I truly think that, you would have been a good mother had you not been programmed to. That was just so sweet and tender and just, and just so heart wrenching for Demerzel to hear those words. So it was a really poignant moment in the show.
Yeah, it was. And again, I'm really curious that she did cry and there was no one around to watch. There was some kind of genuine emotional reaction there.
Yeah. And I think as Duve says that, there's a true sentience there. So does sentience require emotion? I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe that's something that the show is starting to explore.
Maybe.
All right. Still so much to chew over, but as I said, I don't want to monopolize the time you guys have. I can now see season 2 of The Wheel of Time. Yay. And of course, we just had Duve send in his first Wheel of Time feedback. So he concludes, here's to Becky's arse, Stu, aka Duve71. Thanks.
To Becky's arsehole.
Yeah, I don't like saying arsehole. I like just saying arse.
I'm going to say it.
Fair enough. Cool. Thanks, Duve. Appreciate all of your feedback all season long. And thanks for joining us over on A Wheel of Time. Let's now jump over to Kim M. Kim says, "Hi guys. Whoa, I didn't see coming some of those twists and turns. I don't know how or when, but I knew that Bell, Glaywin, and the Spacers were going to turn against Empire. I didn't think it would happen until next season, though. Day got everything he deserved. I wanted to see him suffer by the end. My feelings for Demerzel have been a real roller coaster. Indeed. I go from between feeling compassion and understanding to hate and disappointment. Now she has a prime radiant, which will make her more powerful, but I can't help wondering if Harry has now infiltrated Empire's mainframe via that prime radiant. That's a good thought. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that there will be some kind of communication between the two radiants. I think that's not going to go away.
Right. And Harry, she didn't take it unknowingly. Like, this is, again, within Harry's plan. So,
well, I mean, but the Harry who gave it to her doesn't have a prime radiant anymore.
Correct. So second foundation
is gonna have to be a discovery. And also, the second foundation doesn't have a awake Harry who knows how to use the prime radiant.
Right.
So she's going to be in the dark with it for 150 years.
But then second foundation is going to have mental skills. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what plays out. She continues, maybe he knew all along she wouldn't change. She and Day have become some of my all-time favorite TV villains. What an incredible performance by Laura Byrne and Lee Pace. The whole cast, really. Sad to see Hobart, Bell, and Salver go, but not tell him. She was she was a real wanker.
Yeah,
I'm going to be, she was, but brilliantly acted by Rachel House. So
yes,
I'm going to predict Brother having Hober's child next season. Yeah, I'm on board with that theory.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll win some internet points for that. So I can't wait for next season. I know it's going to be a long wait, but well worth it. Thank you, David and John. Best, Kim M. Thanks, Kim.
Do you think that Hober's child is going to be named Marsh?
Marsh? Wait,
Marshmallow.
That's as good a joke. That belongs in Becky's ass. So, Kim, thanks for your support, and sorry for the confusion on the emails. I think we'll set up the little foundation thing. It's empire@thelorehounds.com, but it makes sense to have a foundation one that directs back. So,
especially because next season there might not be an empire, so we'll see where that goes.
That's a very good point. So, thanks. I'm glad we were able to get these last two in. John, thanks for everything. It was a great season, and looking forward to season 3.
Well, David, we've got our affiliates. Let's just quickly give an overview. You heard Maester Anthony today, and he's over on Properly Howard Movie Review, where they are currently covering remakes. They're about to do The Wicker Man. They just did The Departed. They're having a great time. You don't have to watch the movies to enjoy the content. It is just fun pop culture banter nonsense. Then we have Woolshift Dust, kind of a little bit on a break right now, but coming in strong in October. I'm not sure how much we're allowed to say about Elysia's projects yet, so we'll let her tell you more about those, but definitely subscribe to her feed so you stay up to date with that.
Yep, she's got stuff in the works for sure.
Yep.
So
for us, we've got our 3 shows. Well, one is done, Foundation's done, but we've still got Ahsoka and Wheel of Time. In October, we're going to be back on our monthly shows or our ongoing shows. Marilyn is, of course, the lead on our Earthsea series, and we will be jumping back into the Isles of Earthsea.
We've got the Star Wars Film Fest. We're going to get back to the Clone War. Wait, what?
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith. Thank you. Very lost in my titles. We're also going to be covering Loki. Season 2 in full with Jean and Elysia. So we're getting the MCU crow. And not you, as you keep. And then I think we're going to do a one-shot for The Creator, which is a movie that's going to be on Apple TV, which looks very cool. And we're figuring out what we're going to do with Fall of the House of Usher, because we know Alicia's got a bunch of stuff on there. And so we're going to intertwine with what she's doing to cover that on Netflix. So it's going to be a nice month, October, I think.
Yeah. We'll keep it spooky.
Yes.
All right.
It's true. And we're going to have spooky for second breakfast. You're going to have some spooky movies, right?
I do. I have a list of spooky movies. They were originally a list of twist movies. And you
Mhm.
said, these are all spooky. Let's just do it for Halloween.
Perfect.
I was like, all right, fine.
Yep.
Okay. Marilyn, thanks for being with us tonight.
Oh, it's always a joy and a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you.
David?
And thanks to Anthony, who was sadly had to leave quickly. But yeah, it was so fun. I got a thrill of excitement when I was hearing Hittites and Sumerians being discussed in relationship to a sci-fi TV show. So
Right.
And actually, I have a question. Are we doing a Silmarillion in October as well?
We will be doing a Silmarillion stories in October. So
Yeah.
Right.
fear not, dear listener. There will be Tolkien back again.
And lastly, as we always like to do, we love to give a shout out to our Patreon lore master, our top tier subscribers. All of our subscribers are really important to us. They help keep us moving and keep the lights on over here. But to our lore masters, special thank you in the form of a shout out. Samartian, Cyrus, Mark H., Michael G., Michelle E., David W., Brian P., Nick W., SC, Peter O.H., Bettina W., Adam S., Nancy M., Lavinia T., Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H., Sarah L., Gareth C., Eric F., Matthew M., Sarah M., DJ Miwa, Andra B., Kwang Yu, Laura G., Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T., Alex V., and Aaron T. Ooh, that's 30 names, John. That is an incredible amount of support.
Yeah,
So,
and
thank you
we've
all.
got over 100 patrons now, so we're
Yeah.
very excited.
We finally
Very
broke
excited to
that
keep bringing
ceiling.
things down. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, David, Marilyn, it's been a pleasure speaking to you about Foundation. I'm sure we'll all reconvene for Earthsea and perhaps some Silmarillioning next
Yes.
month. We'll see you then.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening. There's a ton of great nerdy TV out this fall, from the new Star Wars live-action Ahsoka show to the epic journey of the Wheel of Time. The Lorehounds have got you covered with full recaps, deep discussions, and answers to listener questions.
Search for the Lorehounds on your favorite podcast app, including YouTube and Spotify, for a fire hose of science fiction and fantasy. Or head to thelorehounds.com to join the conversation via our contact form or our Discord server.
Whatever you're watching, we'll be there as your guides to great TV.